Hey everyone, if you enjoy these recaps, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Now, let's get started. The story begins with the end of a war. Finally, humanity attains victory over the 6 great demon gods who sought to destroy the world, and even over the perishing sea demon god. All of them are cut down. And yet, standing atop this hard-won triumph, our boy already knows something the celebration never gets to say. Most of the earth has already been swallowed by the perishing sea those bastards created, and humanity itself will soon perish. Even the Tower of Heroes that once sustained the whole earth has crumbled into nothing. They won, so why does it feel like they lost? Lee Se-hoon slumps in the ruins, with blood streaked down his mouth, gasping out a bitter curse. His spine is shattered, and his insides are pulverized, and his lower body is gone numb. 3 horns pulverized, and 4 blue-hued eyes distorted in torment. He sneers at the thing that once bragged of being the strongest of the 6 harbingers, only to be slain in the end by the very humans it belittled. 3 figures approach through the smoke. This is Mad Dog Yum Sung-ha, and this is Explosive Dog Louise Valent, and this is Ice Dog Amir Singh. Together they are known as the 3 Dogs. They were the fence-sitters who never stood with humanity, nor with the other side. They acted however they pleased, interested only in their own gains, and still they survived until the end, and ultimately performed the greatest feats. Our boy the last blacksmith Lee Se-hoon watches them saunter over, and cannot help but wonder how differently things might have turned out if these bastards had just lent their strength a little sooner. They gang up on him. Yum Sung-ha jeers that the perishing sea is not disappearing even with its demon god dead, and that Se-hoon is really making a whole show all by himself. Louise Valent chimes in that anyone watching would think Lee Se-hoon did everything alone. Amir Singh adds that the guy who was lying down faking sick is now trying to act tough. Our boy fires back with a bloody smirk, telling them to cut it, because they would have died ages ago if it were not for the gear he made for them. They snap at him, with one calling him out and another muttering that it is absurd. He barks right back at all 3 of them, telling them to shut it and give the gear back if they do not like it. The anger drains out of them all at once. They collapse against each other with backs turned. Se-hoon asks quietly if any of them are actually going to survive this. Yum Sung-ha admits he is done for with all his insides crushed. Louise Valent says the same thing, and that maybe it is a curse, but the bleeding will not stop. Amir Singh reveals his heart was pierced, so he is no good either. Se-hoon sighs and tells them one more time that they should have just helped from the very start. Instead, they ignored it all and looked out only for themselves. None of them has anything to answer to that. A long silence stretches between all 4 of them. They all become tired to death. He murmurs quietly that they really were high maintenance till the very end. He forces himself up with hammer in hand and picks the 3 broken weapons off the ground. He tells them to treat their gear with some damn care because it cannot be used like this. Sparks fly as his ember hammer glows red and mends the worn blades one after another. He drives each reforged weapon into the earth beside its owner, thinking that these should at least serve as grave markers for them. High maintenance till the end, he thinks again, tender and tired all at once. When he finishes, he stares at the darkening sky and asks if it is now his turn. This will be the last time he does this too. He grips his chest and reaches for the skill he has known his whole cursed life. A window flickers into being. Extracting bond from target Lee Se-hoon and bond with creator Lee Se-hoon is level dash. His unique skill Blacksmith of Bonds lets him extract face stones from those who have formed a bond with him. The ore that comes out varies based on that bond and the target's potential, but whenever he uses it on himself, something worse than common iron ore comes out. A colorless ore extracted from Lee Se-hoon, empty as ever. He thinks bitterly that it would have been better if he had awakened this sooner. But if there is nothing contained in it, then let it at least take this regret that torments him. He hammers the colorless ore with the last of the strength left in his broken body, and something strange happens. Instead of iron ringing against iron, he hears the sound of waves. That same faint sound of waves he has heard ever since he first awakened his magic power. He always wondered what it was. One thing is certain, however. Whenever this sound rings in his ears, an item beyond imagination is always created. When the final blow lands, our boy laughs weakly at what lies in his palm. A plain colorless dagger, with no hidden ability and no imbued power and nothing at all. He wonders if there really is no special ability, even until the very end. He thought something good would come out even if it was just his own bondstone. It is plain as anything. Even so, he points it at himself and decides that rather than being swept away and dying in those waves, he will end his life with his own hands. He really is a crazy bastard too, he thinks, to realize that all he did until the very end was hammering. Then, as he discards the final sword and drives the dagger toward his heart, he realizes something about that sound of waves. He wondered what it was all this time, but it was the perishing sea. If only he had realized it sooner. Or maybe he should have persuaded the 3 dogs sooner. No. If he had just hammered for the sake of others even a little earlier, more things might have changed. The blade slides in as easily as through empty air. A window flashes across his dying vision. The imagery of Armament Dash has manifested. Imagery skill Return to Origin is activating. Then a voice cuts through the darkness, sharp and irritated, calling out to him. Someone shouts hello, and then hey, and then demands to know what candidate Lee Se-hoon is doing right now. Se-hoon opens his eyes to smoke and flame and a blunt hammer pressed against his chest. That word candidate is something he has not heard anyone say in 31 long years. An angry proctor is glaring at him, and behind the man stand several teenagers gathered around a makeshift furnace. The proctor snaps that this is an exam, and if he does not want to comply, he can pack his things and leave the room immediately. The man then demands to know how a candidate can possibly zone out in the middle of the entrance exam. Memory comes flooding back into his head all at once. This is Babel Academy, the place where apprentices ascending the Tower of Heroes are fostered. Is this really his life flashing before his eyes? Then he catches himself and thinks, wait a moment, there was that imagery manifestation he saw right before dying. The imagery skill called Return to Origin. Did that really just happen from the weapon he made with his own bondstone? The proctor warns him one last time, telling him that if he does not do it properly right now, he will be kicked out. The guy murmurs a quiet "ah yes," still reeling. So this is regression. He looks down at the hammer resting in his hand and turns the question over slowly in his mind. If he realizes his given abilities early and swings his hammer sooner, can he change every situation? No, that is not what is really important here. There is only one thing that matters. He must seize the opportunity given to him now. A slow, crooked grin spreads across his soot-streaked face. In that moment, the last blacksmith makes a quiet promise to himself. This time, he will protect it all. The proctor's warning still rings in his ears as Lee Se-hoon lowers his head over the little pile of trash on his anvil. In this life, he will pass the Babel exam. Meeting the 3 dogs is only the beginning of what he needs to change. If he wants any of that future to bend at all, he has to walk out of this room today with an acceptance in hand. He rolls the cheap hammer slowly between his fingers and checks the remaining time on the clock. Then he closes his eyes and settles into a rhythm he has not known for 31 years. The hammer starts to move on its own. Each blow lands slow, but the strikes are perfectly rhythmic, and they carry a clean, pure resonance across the whole examination hall. Kim In-cheol, the middle-aged head professor, drifting between the workstations, freezes mid-step. He mutters under his breath that this is astonishing. He notes to himself that it looks slow, but is perfectly rhythmic with a clear, pure resonance. This, he thinks, is top-tier forging skill. The other trainees look up one by one, with their own hammers falling still around them. Someone whispers in disbelief, asking what that level of perfection even is. Someone else murmurs that this candidate really made that. The proctor Han In-sung watches the piece take shape and thinks to himself that an incredible candidate has quietly applied. Kim In-cheol is satisfied enough to grant a passing grade on the spot. He decides that if the young man just submits it as it is, he will pass immediately. A sudden sharp crack tears through the hall. Their heads jerk up in shock at a sight none of them have ever witnessed at an exam before. Se-hoon exhales slowly and admits to himself that he still has a long way to go. Showing off this kind of trash is something he absolutely cannot tolerate as a blacksmith. Not now, and not ever again. Se-hoon had a rather slam. Han In-sung finally snaps and storms toward him, roaring that he just destroyed a weapon right in front of the professor. He demands to know if Se-hoon thinks smithing is a joke. Se-hoon's voice comes out quiet, but perfectly clear. He addresses the proctor as Sir and tells him that he would like to remake the assignment. Han In-sung is about to launch into another scolding when Kim In-chel steps forward. He calmly tells Assistant Han to bring the candidate the remaining materials. Han In-sung stammers a stunned pardon. In-chel notes that the young man did not really break any rules. Then he adds dry and pointed that Han can go get the materials himself if he prefers. Han In-sung yelps out a mortified sound and scurries off, promising to bring everything right away. While the proctor is gone, Kim In-chel steps up to our boy and speaks to him plainly. He addresses him as young man and asks if he knows that there are only 40 minutes left in the exam. Se-hoon answers that he does. In-chel then asks if he really thinks breaking that was the right decision. A long silence passes between them. Se-hoon lifts his head and tells the professor that he simply cannot submit something like that. In-chel studies him for a moment and sees no wavering anywhere in his eyes. He gives him a small, quiet order to do his best. Se-hoon turns to the fresh iron ore and ignition stones Han In-sung has dumped beside him. He turns the situation over in his head fast. With this body, perfect forging is difficult. His mana and his strength and even time itself are all running short. So the best option in this situation is not the usual one at all. He selects a handful of ignition stones and pushes what little mana he has into his palms and starts smashing them together. Trainees jerk their heads up at the strange crackling. Somebody blurts out asking what that noise even is. Another mutters that this guy is infusing mana into the ignition stones. A third shouts at him to stop, warning that if those things catch fire, the ignition stones will explode. Sparks jump from Se-hoon's hands, and flames flicker between his fingers. One of the trainees cries out asking where that burning smell is coming from. Then a wall of iridescent flame roars out of the furnace. People shriek about fire and yell for a fire extinguisher and beg the professor to tell him to stop. Kim In-chel simply folds his arms and tells them to let him be. He adds coolly that he does not want them reacting like that either. The professor watches the multicolored flames curl around the ingot with sharp, focused eyes. He quietly names the technique in his head as the 5-color fire demon. This is a high-temperature flame enhanced by the resonance of 5 types of ignition stones. It demands precise mana control, but in exchange it lets a blacksmith work even when their reserves are almost empty. The trainees gape and gasp that it did not explode. Then they blurt out that the color of the iron ingot itself is changing. Kim In-chel lets out a slow, understanding breath and thinks to himself, so that was it. Our boy resonated the ignition stones to enhance the firepower and modify the properties of the ingot in one move. Even so, In-chel's face tightens. This will significantly shorten the time needed for forging, but with only 30 minutes left on the clock, time is still tight. His forging earlier was already excellent, but if that is all the young man has, In-chel quietly concludes that he will not make it in time. Sparks scatter across Se-hoon's face as his mana finally gives out and the flame protection around his hands dies. He begins to take the blade out from the 5-color flame. Then he put that on the anvil and smash it with his hammer to shape it. He thinks that he ran out of mana and the protection gave out. He needs to start training the very moment this exam is over. Still, he cannot afford to waste a single second right now. He grips the hammer tighter and tells himself to push the body to its limit. He drives every ounce of strength he has left into each strike, to each strike. The clock keeps sliding forward against him. 10 minutes remaining is called out across the hall, and then 3 minutes, and then a single minute. Finally, the proctor calls for everyone to stop. The guy lets the hammer clatter down with his chest heaving. A soft chime blooms across his vision. Armament 5-color Fireblade has been completed. He has acquired the skill Artisan of Flame at level 1. Judgment result is that the rank of 5-color Fireblade is high. The description window fills in around the blade, describing a curved sword engraved with 5 flames. Compressed hues in the metal react with mana to produce colorful glows, and the whole item offers a glimpse into the potential of the blacksmith who created it. Han In-sung stares at the readout and mouths the words that the armament's grade is high. Then he explodes into a full-lunged shriek of pass. Somebody nearby snaps at him to quiet down. Han In-sung stammers out a mortified apology and folds in on himself with cheeks flaming. To eat torque and semshes. The exam room fades away, and our boy finds himself sitting across from Kim In-chel inside the professor's private office. In-chel asks if it really was a sword worthy of submission this time. Se-hoon replies that for now, yes it was. In-chel observes gently that he still looks unsatisfied. Then he decides to speak frankly. He addresses Sehun by his full name and tells him that this place will not satisfy his standards. It would be better for him to withdraw his application entirely. Babel's reputation may be overwhelming, Incheal admits, but the refining department here has not been producing any notable results in years. Sehun says nothing out loud, but inside his head he thinks that it is a fact he already knows. Babel's refining department will shut down in 8 years due to declining standards, and in the future Vulcan Academy will become the world's best institution for training blacksmiths. Kim In-cheol continues softer now, saying that perhaps in the future Vulcan will be the best. He gets no further than that. Our boy cuts him off with his voice quiet and absolutely certain. He tells the professor plainly that he is wrong. The best will not be Vulcan, it will be Babel, the place where he is enrolling. The sun bleeds red across the Babel Academy skyline as Lee Se-hoon leans back in his chair and repeats himself calmly for the professor across the desk. He tells the professor plainly that Kim In-cheol is mistaken here. The best will not be Vulcan Academy at all. It will be Babel, the place where he is enrolling. In-cheol studies him for a long moment and then folds his arms. He tells the young man that in that case he will need to become the department valedictorian first. He asks quietly if he is confident. Our boy meets his eyes without flinching and answers of course. At least on the student level there will not be anyone better than him. In-cheol raises an eyebrow and then decides to test how much he actually understands. He asks Sehun if he knows how the freshman department valedictorian is selected at Babel. Sehun nods once and tells him that he does know the process. The academy picks one department valedictorian candidate through an additional exam between the top 2 students of a department. From those candidates, the actual department valedictorian is then chosen. In-cheol nods and adds the broader picture around it. Babel Academy divides its cadets broadly into 3 departments. Akar Kuf is the combat department, and is the support department, and Borsipa is the technology department, where the blacksmiths sit. Within each of them dozens of majors intertwine. Being the department valedictorian means receiving the most outstanding evaluation among all those countless majors, and being acknowledged as a top-tier talent by all of Babel. Then, In-cheol's voice drops a notch. He tells Sehun that he will say this one more time not as a professor now, but as a senior blacksmith. Even if the young man becomes the department valedictorian, it will still be hard to expect real success as a blacksmith here. He should go to Vulcan Academy. That is the path for him. Sehun holds still and watches him quietly for a long breath. Inside his head he notes that this is a man putting a junior's future before his own position. He quietly acknowledges that In-cheol is a decent man, but the environment does not matter to him. As our boy just said, Babel, the place where he is enrolling into, will soon become the best. In-cheol lets out a small defeated laugh at that. The place where he is becoming the best. It is a statement that goes beyond arrogance, and yet for some reason the professor finds that he does not hate it at all. He stands up and extends his hand across the desk. He tells the young man that he looks forward to working with him. Sehun looks at the offered hand for a beat and then takes it firmly with his bandaged palm. He answers that he looks forward to it as well. A soft blue window blooms in the corner of his vision. A bond with the target Kim In-cheol has been established. The bond with creator Lee Se-hoon is level 1. Our boy triggers bond extraction almost by reflex and a warm ore lifts up out of In-cheol's essence and settles into his palm. The information window fills in around it as he watches. This is a bond ore called flame-bearing iron, listed at high grade with mid-low quality. It is a metal possessing a flame with wood-like properties and capable of storing fire inside itself. Sehun closes his fingers around the ore and files it away carefully. Back at his ramshackle little house in the slums, Sehun sits on the edge of his bed and turns the flame-bearing iron over between his fingers with a low hum. It is not bad, honestly, but to think it is only this size. Bond extraction quantifies the relationship he has with a specific target, drawing out ores that would not otherwise exist anywhere in the world. The problem is that the bond level with In-cheol is still low, which makes the ore difficult to utilize as of now. Also, compared to Babel freshman, his own stats are not great. A translucent status window opens up in front of him. Strength sits at E rank with 62 points, durability at E with 55, mana power at F with 43, agility at F with 47. His unique skill remains Blacksmith of Bonds. He carries no elemental mana whatsoever, and his only listed trait is Artisan of Flame at C rank. Miserable levels all across the board. The guy lets out a slow, tired breath. It is regrettable in many ways, but considering it is the price for returning to the past, it is a cheap one. All right then, he thinks, and tells himself not to be impatient about any of this. Wanting more than this is simply greed. There is still enough time left to crush those pandemonium bastards. His thoughts shift and darken. Pandemonium is the name of the monsters that threaten not just humanity, but the entire planet itself. The fact that the 6 great demon gods rose up and caused the destruction of humanity was also entirely their plan. He cannot be picky about the means and the methods if he wants to stop them. Even more importantly, he cannot afford to get confused about important future events either. He needs to obtain memory-related armaments or skills first before anything else slips out of his grasp. The first step of the plan, which was enrolling in Babel, is now resolved. Next is something else entirely. A chime cuts across his thoughts. His eye reflects the blue glow of a fresh system prompt. User Lee Sehun's bond level has reached level 1. Skill bond imprint has been added. Our boy stares at the message for a long, quiet moment, and something settles into place inside his chest. 1 week later at Babel Academy, Sehun wanders the halls of the enormous building in a loose white shirt, muttering that he is lost again and asking himself if this is even the right place. Then he spots the sign hanging above a doorway that reads, "Refining Room 3. He lets out a small, relieved ah. This is it, and this is where he is supposed to be. He slides the door open and starts a polite greeting before a cold voice from the front of the room cuts him off, addressing him crisply by name as Cadet Lee Sehun. Sehun's shoulders stiffen instinctively at the tone. A blond, middle-aged man in a spotless light suit is watching him from behind the podium with arms crossed. He coolly informs him that he looks quite relaxed. He asks if the cadet cannot see everyone waiting on him. A small nameplate hovers by the man's shoulder, introducing him as Michael Barmouth, Vice Dean of Borsippa. Kim In-cheol steps in from the side and calmly reminds the Vice Dean that there are still 10 minutes before the additional exam begins. Michael Barmouth counters that it is not a matter of time but of attitude, and that he will give the cadet a warning about that himself. Sehun's eyes narrow behind his casual expression as the pieces click together in his head. So it is not just that the refining department is in a bad state. In-cheol is also at odds with the higher-ups here. Now our boy understands exactly why the professor recommended a different academy in the first place. Then another set of eyes lands on him from the side, sharp and appraising. A blond young man in an immaculate cadet uniform is studying him with open contempt. The stranger's mouth twitches into a smile so smooth it feels almost wrong. He greets Sehun with a "nice to meet you." The young man just stares back at him with his brain glitching for a full 3 seconds. He wonders internally what the hell is going on and mutters to himself in disbelief that this is honestly unbelievable. Then a shout goes up from the doorway announcing that everyone has finally gathered. A pair of black shoes clicks smoothly across the tile as someone new strides into the room. In-cheol turns and murmurs that they were wondering when the dean would arrive. Sehun lifts his head to look at the newcomer, and his breath stops in his throat. He thinks to himself that this person is someone he knows. A tall woman with long red hair tied back into a neat ponytail settles into the seat beside the vice dean. Her black suit is crisp and her face is utterly emotionless. She apologizes flatly for her tardiness. A nameplate blooms in the air beside her. Babel Borsippa Dean Ryu Yunha. Sehun's eyes blow wide open in shock. His face crumples in absolute disbelief, with hands flying up to his hair. His mind screams a single question at him at full volume. Why the heck is she here? Lee Sehun sits frozen in his seat as the tall, red-haired woman across the room settles into her judge's chair. He heard she was working at Babel before sure, but he did not expect her to be the dean of Borsippa. His mind flips through the file he already carries about her. S-rank hero codename, Weapon Eater Ryu Yunha, a hero whose unique skill amplifies her power by devouring armaments. Before his regression, she was just a regular customer of his for a very long time, and their history stretched even further back than his ties to the 3 dogs. His memory drags out a moment from another life. She stands in the rain in a torn coat with her red ponytail heavy with water and breath still uneven from battle. She admits in a low voice that she regrets eating his armament. Even in the memory he can see the sword flakes still glinting on her lips. Our boy blinks the image away as a voice calls out his name from the podium, telling him to focus. He jolts back to the present and mumbles a quick acknowledgement. Kim In-chel clears his throat and says that he will now explain the exam, so everyone should pay attention. The rules come out clean and tight. The total exam time is 90 minutes. During those 90 minutes, the two of them must create an armament that can be paired with the sword each of them submitted from the previous exam. However, and In-chel lets that word hang heavy in the air, they can only use alchemy smithing to craft it. As for the materials, they may freely use any of the ores present here in the room. The created armaments will be judged by Dean Ryu Yunha and Vice Dean Michael Barmouth, so they should make sure to bring something they can be proud of. Michael Barmouth folds his hands and gives the room a cold, satisfied look. He declares that the exam has begun. Just alchemy smithing, Se-hoon mutters as he rolls up his sleeves. He has to create a resonance using only pure mana, so that the elemental mana in the ores does not go berserk on him. From across the workbench, Hans Barmouth sneers that staring at the materials really does not increase your mana, does it? The guy pauses and turns his head. He asks flatly if that was directed at him just now, or if there is anyone else around here. Michael snaps at his son to refrain from making comments unrelated to the exam. Hans lowers his eyes politely and says he will be careful. Then Se-hoon really looks at them. Michael Barmouth and Hans Barmouth standing together. Then Se-hoon really looks at them. Michael Barmouth and Hans Barmouth standing together. The same slicked-back blonde hair, the same cold blue eyes. This guy Hans is the judge's own son, and no wonder they look so alike. The same slicked-back blonde hair, the same cold blue eyes. This guy Hans is the judge's own son, and no wonder they look so alike. He watches the realization dawn on Hans's face too. Hans's mouth curls at the corner because he understands that Se-hoon has finally figured out the connection. Inside his own head, Hans lays out the math. Se-hoon is a commoner with the lowest background and the lowest mana among the entrants. Hans himself was born into the Barmouth family, a renowned house of alchemy smithing. He possesses mana capacity comparable to a second-year department valedictorian. The result of this exam has already been decided. He picks up his materials with a soft chuckle. Lazurite and Hainam Jade, both packed with high-content mana. On top of that, both are elemental materials imbued with water attribute mana. Kim In-chel looks across the podium at Michael and speaks with a professor's calm. It is true that alchemy smithing is not bound by space or situation, but the smithing time varies greatly depending on the caster and the ore. So in a situation like today, 30 minutes should be enough. Hans can synthesize any ore within 30 minutes. In-chel's eyes widen a fraction. Resonance synthesis in just 30 minutes. If Hans is at a level where he can perform resonance synthesis that fast, he is well above second years, let alone entrance. Then the last piece slides into place inside In-chel's head. Tight time for smithing mana stones, abundant materials in the room, and the alchemy smithing method itself. They have chosen an exam topic that is completely advantageous to Hans, who excels at alchemy smithing from the very beginning. In-chel curses inwardly at Michael for being that snake. Se-hoon picks his own materials with a small satisfied grunt and murmurs that this should do. Michael's head snaps up as he registers the choice. That is Hydrite and Crimson Firestone, the fire attribute versions of Lazurite and Hainam Jade, both with high mana content. Hans smirks and mutters that he does not know about the guy's skills, but his pride sure is high. In Michael's head, the logic is even harsher. Did the boy choose ores that contrast with his son's on purpose, the stupid fool? With the mana he possesses, our boy could never wish to control Crimson Firestone. Hans starts to laugh out loud, saying that this will be easier than he thought. A system window blooms in the air around Se-hoon before Hans can finish the word. Skill Bond Imprint is activated. Bond Imprint Harmony is activated. The description scrolls across his vision. The skill allows the user to wear bond stones on his body to use them, and the current equipable slots are the left arm and the right arm. Then another line drops into place beneath it, equipping flame-bearing iron to the right arm. A single ember flickers in the air over Se-hoon's shoulder and then rushes down and wraps around his right hand as a living scarlet flame. Hans gapes at the sight and blurts out that this guy is using cheap tricks. A blazing flame erupts in his palm. He begins forging the various ores into shape. Michael narrows his eyes and speaks half to himself. He asks if Sehun really intends to make a resonance using the same attribute as the minerals themselves, and how foolish this all looks. It is basic knowledge to resonate elemental minerals using only pure mana. If it is forced, eventually the elemental mana will go berserk. He watches for a beat longer, and then thinks with cold certainty that this stupid idiot is definitely going to cause an accident. But there is no accident. Sehun's right hand plunges forward and wraps the hydrite and crimson firestone in a coiling wall of scarlet flame. The ores neither shatter nor lash out. They melt clean, singing along with the fire in a rhythm only our boy seems to hear. Hans stumbles back from the workbench and shouts about what the hell this firepower is even supposed to be. The system window in front of Sehun starts stacking messages faster than either of the judges can track. Flame-bearing iron has been unequipped, and the armament processing is complete. Congratulations, armament fire accumulating sheath has been crafted. A scabbard wrapped in a deep red cord settles into his palm, glowing subtly with fire attribute mana. The information window fills in around it as a fire accumulating sheath of rare grade and low quality. It is a scabbard imbued with fire attribute mana 1 that stores and amplifies fire attribute mana, and one that also allows the use of the skill wildfire. At the judges' table, both Hans and Michael go blank. Hans stammers out, asking if the guy is already done with the synthesis and how it can possibly be that fast. Michael mutters that it is impossible. The usual outcome is for the elemental mana to go berserk. He asks himself if he understood it wrong somewhere. Then Michael's brain finally catches up to his eyes. He lunges half out of his chair and shouts at Sehun to wait, telling him to stop right now. If he imbues the mana stones with elemental mana at this level, the consequences will be severe. But our boy is already past the point of stopping. A crackle of raw blue-white energy erupts around his hands, drowning the room in cold light. Michael's warning dies in his throat with a stunned sound. The entire examination hall is swallowed by a white blast of shattering brilliance. The dust has barely settled inside the additional department valedictorian exam hall when Michael Barmet opens his mouth, first gathering his composure back onto his shoulders. Various ores lie scattered across the floor. He tells the room that normally after going through an evaluation like this, one of the two candidates would have been recommended as a department valedictorian. But it is a pity to think it would end in a forfeit instead. Since a student was injured during the exam, it would be best to declare the whole thing voided and announce a re-examination date later. Kim In-chel pushes back cleanly at that. They cannot overturn an exam that has already taken place. Michael counters that, after all, was this not caused by student Hans's own carelessness in the first place? In-cheol's jaw tightens as he asks the vice dean if he cares more about the exam results than about his own student. Then he lays the truth out in a single measured breath. The fastest resonance speed currently announced in all of academia is 5 minutes, however. And yet a student who has barely just entered the school activated his mana and simultaneously achieved resonance in almost no time at all. He asks the vice dean if he honestly thinks that makes any sense whatsoever. Our boy stands quietly through all of this with the fire accumulating sheath still cooling in his palm. When his moment finally comes, he lifts his head and tells them exactly what he did and why it will not be denied. Alchemy smithing was originally a technique born to craft armaments using only mana in situations where normal smithing was impossible. Therefore, what alchemy smithing is truly about is not the traditional smithing method of killing the ore to fill it with the blacksmith's life. It is about finding the roots of the mineral core and unfolding the life of the ore itself. That is the essence of alchemy smithing. That is exactly what he just accomplished, and it is also the answer which academia will eventually uncover on its own after countless trials and errors. It is a simple method that will become the standard in a few years, so there is no real need for him to keep it a secret. But there is also no need to teach it to a stiff old fogey who just barks threats without listening. Michael's ear twitches at the jab. He says flatly that he does not know what the boy is talking about at all. Michael doubles down instead of backing off. As expected, he says the boy used a fraudulent method, a freshman with no proper family background, creating a rare grade armament. If he had been planning to cheat, he should have at least kept it within the realm of possibility. The guy raises an eyebrow, silently wondering what the hell the man is even saying at this point. Then Ryu Yunha's flat voice cuts across the room. She agrees with the vice dean that he is entirely right about this. It really does not make any sense at all. Michael's face lights up. As expected, the dean understands what he is saying. He tells the room that this is absurd and they should disqualify Cadet Lee Se-hoon for fraud and proceed straight to a re-examination, but Ryu Yunha says nothing more. She simply stares at the scabbard in Se-hoon's hand as if it were something she has been waiting for. Michael calls her name uncertainly across the table. Kim In-cheol calls out Cadet Lee Se-hoon by name to try to snap her out of it. And that is when the Dean of Borsippa, the terrifying S-rank weapon eater herself, finally opens her mouth with the words nobody in the room ever expected to hear. Her red eyes gleam with something raw and hungry as she begs for just one bite. No, she corrects herself quickly. Just one lick. Can she please lick the scabbard just once? The whole hall goes dead still around her. Michael blinks at her in speechless silence. In-cheol repeats her words back to her in disbelief, asking if she really just said that. The whole atmosphere devolves into pure chaos as everyone stares at the dean with expressions that no formal exam hall was ever built to hold. Later that same afternoon, our boy walks the downtown streets in loose civilian clothes, with his hands in his pockets and his thoughts running fast. As expected, the fine-tuning of the fire-accumulating sheath is still immature, and the tuning of the skill inside it is definitely still incomplete. Even so, seeing Vice Dean Barmut trembling with rage back in that hall was quite a sight to behold. He lets out a small, quiet snicker at the memory of it all. Then his steps slow down against the pavement. Wait a moment now. Come to think of it, that name Barmut does ring a bell somewhere, but he cannot place it. Barmut, he turns the sound over in his head. The memory hits him hard. He sees Louise Vallant, the explosive dog, sitting slumped in some ruined alley long after they had all become monsters. She lifts a scarred arm and mutters that when she was at Babel she was poor. This person named Barmut told her he could forge armor for her cheap if she did some odd jobs for him, so she worked for him for a few months and he sold her a bomb. That is how she got the mana burns and ended up the way she did. Our boy's breath goes shallow as the pieces click together in his head. The name of the blacksmith who left the explosive dog Louise Vallant with lifelong injuries was Barmut. So this Hans Barmut sitting in the exam hall today is that very blacksmith who is going to ruin her whole future. His original plan for this life had been to quickly make contact with the three dogs one by one and rehabilitate them from the ground up. But now there will be no need at all for that particular step with the explosive dog. Because if he stops Hans Barmut from acting up right here, right now, then the explosive dog will never go astray in the first place. Se-hoon walks off toward the burning horizon with something colder and sharper than a smile settling onto his face. Somewhere else on campus, inside the Borsippa department conference room, that same fight is playing out live in real time. Ryu Inha's voice cuts across the long table as she declares to the assembled professors that she wants to make student Lee Se-hoon the department valedictorian of Borsippa. Somewhere else on campus, inside the Borsippa department conference room, that same fight is playing out live in real time. Ryu Inha's voice cuts across the long table as she declares to the assembled professors that she wants to make student Lee Se-hoon the department valedictorian of Borsippa. Ryu Inha stares them down without blinking and asks quietly if she is hearing objections from anyone. One professor stammers that no, rather than objections, it is closer to advice. Michael Barmut leans in with a smooth voice. After all, Dean, it has not been that long at all since she took office. Another professor picks up the thread, saying that they understand Cadet Lee Se-hoon's armament was impressive, but perhaps it would be better to review it more closely first. Kim In-cheol finally speaks up in Se-hoon's defense. The other professors are saying that because they have not actually seen Cadet Lee Se-hoon's fire-accumulating sheath in person yet, it may lack refined craftsmanship on the surface of it. But if they consider the way the mana was used inside it and its compatibility with the 5-color fireblade, it is unlike anything else in this year's incoming class. One of the older professors murmurs that yes, it is surprising, but in all honesty he wonders to what extent it truly is. Kim In-cheol pushes harder against them. This armament is likely less than 60% of the completeness that Cadet Lee Se-hoon originally intended for it, and that very deficiency is precisely what makes it so promising going forward. If even after seeing all that they still cannot accept it, then he does not know what else to say. Ryu Unha stands slowly from her chair with her red ponytail sweeping down her shoulder as she rises to her full height. Her voice drops to something quiet and absolutely final. For Cadet Lee Se-hoon's valedictorian demonstration, if the room cannot accept her decision, then she will step down from her position as the dean. The whole conference room freezes solid at once. Somewhere behind her, the sky begins to bruise deep red as the day ends around them. Beneath the vaulted ceiling of the entrance ceremony hall, an old man in a long white robe stands alone at the podium, and the whole world seems to lean in around him. He tells the crowd that 54 years ago, the world changed. The heavens sent down the Tower of Heroes to catalyze humanity's evolution. In response, the underground unleashed the swamp of pandemonium, which corrupts life. While mankind gained new possibilities to pursue a massive calamity was born simultaneously, and Babel too was born within that flow. The largest academy in history, established in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, has produced countless heroes until now. A gilded nameplate blooms in the air beside him. This man at the podium is the Ascension Emperor Ludwig Schubert. He looks out over the sea of new students and tells them warmly that they too will become one of those heroes someday. He commands them to go forth and take up that mantle. That is their duty as heroes. That is what all of them now bear after ascending to Babel. Our boy claps along with the rest of the crowd from his seat down in the audience. This is the Ascension Emperor, Ludwig Schubert. Looking at the old man like this, he seems like such a nice person, even though he is in reality not exactly a purely good old man at all. Se-hoon knows better from a lifetime he has not yet lived. The host's voice picks up as the applause dies down. Next, they will have the valedictorian demonstration for this year's top entrants. So will the department valedictorian cadets please come forward to the stage now. Our boy stands and starts up the steps, muttering under his breath about being called a department valedictorian. He used to wonder in his past life why there were so many guys who acted so arrogant just because they did well in the academy. He is starting to see how it happens. Now then, he thinks as he settles into place on the platform. Seeing this whole atmosphere around them, he thinks he understands. The host declares that they will now begin the demonstration and then unveils what the top entrants will be facing today. The item to be used in this demonstration is the golem produced by the marionette factory called Automaton Model 9. It even possesses the performance to spar against a C-rank hero. It is a combat-type automaton. Since it has no particular armaments, it must wield martial arts. Then first up is the combat department, the host announces. The combat demonstration will be carried out by Akarkuf's valedictorian Jake Myers. A blond young man steps forward with no weapon on his belt and a boyish face lit up with easy confidence. If this is really Jake Se-hoon wonders internally. Was he not the third son of the Myers family? He heard the guy was an oddball who used martial arts despite coming from a family famous for their swordsmanship. Guess that rumor was actually true. The host raises his mic and calls for the match to immediately begin. Jake settles into a low, bare-handed stance, and the automaton lunges at him first. His first punch alone sends the black steel puppet flying through the air. Blue-white afterimages trail his fists as he keeps closing the distance, chaining strike after strike into the automaton's armor plate. The metal crumples under his knuckles. Jake grins across the space between them and calls out that now it is his turn. The room goes white with the sound of his next hit. His fist drives clean through the puppet's chest. From down in the audience, our boy stares at the display in slow disbelief and wonders what on earth this is even supposed to be. He definitely heard the guy died young as an A-rank hero in his mid-20s. But at this level, Jake is a prodigy, the likes of which Babel only sees once in a decade. Why did he only end up as an A-rank in his past life? Jake pulls his arms in and drops into one final stance. He murmurs that, with this, it is the end. His body vanishes in a blur, and the automaton's helmeted head simply detonates. When the dust falls, Jake straightens up and stretches his shoulders. He lets out a lazy little sigh, saying it has been a while since he last loosened up. Cheers erupt through the whole crowd. Someone shouts that this was a truly magnificent demonstration by Cadet Jake. He subdued an automaton with combat power equal to a C-rank hero in a single breath. As expected of Akarkuf's valedictorian, the guy watches Jake wave with a small, satisfied smirk of his own. He murmurs that Jake really shook things up right from the very start. Whoever comes up next is going to feel some serious pressure now. Continuing on, the host announces that up next is the valedictorian of the support department, The demonstration will be done by Cadet Inoue Erika. Se-hoon leans back into his seat with his arms folded and mutters that, so she is valedictorian. As for pressure, there is no real need to worry about that at all. A tall young woman with waist-long black hair walks up to the platform in absolute silence. A nameplate materializes behind her, introducing her as Erika, the eldest daughter of the Inoue family, one of the 3 great families of Japan. She was never a summit climber of the Towers of Heroes, but she made a name for herself as an S-rank hero, wielding a mythical-grade armament all the same. However, in the end, she had been corrupted into a Majin and was directly subjugated by her own family. Since she gets eroded into a Majin in the future, no matter what our boy thinks, with a dry inward sigh, that getting close to her will not really do him any good at all. Then Erika slowly turns her head across the room, and her purple eyes land squarely on him for a full breath. Sehun blinks in surprise back at her. Did she really just look at him right now, or is there anyone else nearby that she could have been looking at? By the time he glances back, she has already looked away. The host lifts his mic to explain that the automaton for this demonstration is the same Model 9 as before, but equipped with reinforced armor this time. It boasts a defense approximately 1.5 times that of the previous model. Just what kind of performance will Cadet Inoue show them today? From behind her back, Erika lifts a small silver cage into view. Inside it perches a single ordinary black crow. She calmly unlocks the door with pale fingers, and the crow hops out onto her hand. Then her eye flashes with cold purple light, and she gives it a single quiet order to go. The crow explodes upward off her fingers in a streak of silvered light, with wings tearing the air with a raw, screeching cry. Down in the crowd, Sehun tilts his head to the side and murmurs a dubious little question about whether that is really just a crow. Brambinshirwaisam Perchinmin immediately drops into a defensive stance, with arms crossed and mana shield humming around it. Sehun narrows his eyes and thinks that the automaton has adopted a defensive stance now. It will be hard to pierce through something like that, especially since this one is a defensive type to begin with. The crow rockets down out of the sky. It punches through the shield with barely a sound and glances off the armor and lands smoothly on the ground behind the puppet. For a beat, everyone holds their breath in the stands. Sehun narrows his eyes further, watching for what he knows must be there. Then the automaton simply comes apart with the chest cavity blown clean through in a single perfect hole. It topples backward with a dull metallic boom. Erika strolls back off the platform without so much as a glance at what she just destroyed. The crowd erupts around her with cries of amazing and truly amazing. With just a single strike, the defense-enhanced automaton fell to the floor. She pierced right through a defense meant to stop a C-rank hero. Voices in the audience chant her name with real awe. Our boy stares at the fever running through the room and thinks quietly that this is not going to be easy at all. With an atmosphere like this, he honestly feels like he will get booed right off the stage if he just shows off his armament and calls it a day. Then the host lifts the mic one last time. Finally up next is the valedictorian of the technology department, Borsippa. His name is called out across the whole ceremony hall as Cadet Lee Se-hoon. The first demonstration supervisor, Ludwig Schubert, announces from the podium that the technology department Borsippa is up next. His warm voice carries across the central auditorium and calls for Cadet Lee Se-hoon to step forward. The crowd is still buzzing over Erika Inoue's crow strike, with some of them chanting that their hearts are already burning with excitement for what comes next. Standing beside Ludwig as second demonstration supervisor, Dean Ryu Yunha calmly assures him that there will not be any issues. Her tone is flat as ever. A commentator on the sidelines wonders aloud if the Borsippa valedictorian can possibly surpass the shocking performances of Cadet Jake and Cadet Erika. And into the middle of that pressure walks our boy Lee Se-hoon with hands calm at his sides. He sets 2 bags down on the table and unlocks them, revealing the 5-color fireblade and the fire-accumulating sheath. Information windows shimmer in the air, showing the stats and appearance of both armaments. Observers murmur that the sword is rare grade and that a freshman from the refining department crafting a rare grade armament is genuinely impressive. But the murmur cools within moments. They note that compared to the other departments, it lacks impact. The other demonstrations were quite flashy after all. Watching from his platform, Vice Dean Michael Barmuth allows himself a private smile. He thinks that the heavens are truly in his favor. At this rate, he tells himself the position of Dean of Borsippa is his for the taking. Minim. The host clears his throat and begins the announcement that the demonstration apparatus will be Model 10 possessing combat power equivalent to a D-rank hero. Se-hoon cuts him off flatly and tells him no. He wants model number 8 instead, and he wants it equipped with armor. The host stammers in disbelief. Around the arena, commentators exchange stunned looks. They point out that Model 8 can already withstand attacks from a B-rank hero in some cases, and asking for armor on top of that is unheard of. The host apologizes that arranging such a thing on short notice is difficult. Then, with barely concealed panic, he asks if the cadet is trying to ruin the demonstration. The guy simply replies that he has already prepared it in advance. Right on cue, Kim In-cheol wheels the armored Model 8 onto the platform. The audience gasps that he has it ready already. Se-hoon feels a gaze on his back and turns to find Ludwig watching him with a gentle, knowing smile, silently telling him to go wild out there. Se-hoon quietly reads the message. He lifts the sword and the sheath. The trembling host stumbles through his announcement that the match may finally commence. Well then, our boy thinks with a small grin. Shall he live up to those expectations? He draws the 5-color fireblade in one fluid motion, and streaks of fire flare out from the edge. Somewhere in the crowd, someone breathes that this is insane. On the higher platform, a blonde onlooker sneers that it is all flash and no substance. He wonders what a guy who lacks mana could possibly do. Our boy does not need to answer. The flames contained within the 5-color fireblade have the natural property of clashing with one another. That explosion could injure the wielder if it is not controlled with significant mana. But by using the property of the fire-accumulating sheath to store flames internally, and by injecting crimson flames inside, using his trait Artisan of Flame, Se-hoon quietly reroutes the entire disaster into controlled storage. Storage completed, he murmurs, sliding the blade back into the sheath. His stance drops low and steady. The armament skill of the fire-accumulating sheath, called Wildfire, detonates the mana compressed inside. And if activated in this state, the forcibly compressed 5-color fire demons will explode all at once. He whispers the word, and the entire stage vanishes into a blooming wall of 5-colored fire. For a long moment, no one speaks. When the smoke thins, the surrounding stalls are simply gone, and the armored Model 8 is a scorched smear on cracked tile. Se-hoon lowers the blade and exhales a small breath. Then he wonders inwardly if he might have overdone it just a little. Unbothered, Ludwig calmly lifts the microphone and calls for the construction support team to report to the central auditorium immediately. And just like that, the department valedictorian demonstration midterm evaluation is over. Later, in a quieter alley just outside the auditorium, Se-hoon waits and thumbs at his phone until the sharp tap of heels approaches. Ryu Eun-ha arrives with her usual unreadable calm. Se-hoon apologizes for being late after being called here, explaining that he was helping clean up the arena. She tells him that if anything, she should be the one apologizing. Emboldened, he apologizes again for the destruction at the central auditorium, admitting he should have controlled the release better. Ryu Eun-ha only looks at him and asks what on earth he is talking about Cadet Se-hoon. Confused, our boy asks if she did not summon him out here to scold him. Of course not, she answers, telling him the real reason she called him is. Then a loud growl cuts her off. Her stomach speaks before she can. The young man stares at her, blinking. Ryu Eun-ha clears her throat and straightens her posture and starts over. She tells him plainly that she will pay him 10 times the market price. She asks if he would be willing to sell the 5-color fireblade and the fire-accumulating sheath to her. He manages a single dumbfounded what in reply. In that same instant, a familiar system window blooms in front of him, confirming that a bond with the target Ryu Eun-ha has been established. Our boy stares at the future S-rank weapon eater, trying and failing to hide that she simply wants to devour his equipment. He cannot help but smile a little. Somehow, unbelievably, everything is going to work out just fine. Ryu Eun-ha stares at the 2 armaments in her hands and quietly admits that this is an amazing set. Right on cue, a familiar system window blooms in front of our boy Lee Se-hoon. It confirms that a bond with the target Ryu Eun-ha has been established, and that the bond with the creator has reached level 1. Already, he thinks with a small blink of surprise. Before the regression, this same bond had only formed after he had fed her weapons multiple times. This round 1 meeting is enough. Ryu Eun-ha thanks him under her breath, and quietly notes that this is at the very least a good opportunity. Se-hoon does not need a second invitation. He activates bond extraction on the spot.
So am I.
The system shifts to confirm that it is extracting a bond from the target Ryu Eun-ha. The result glows in the air between them as gluttony iron grade high and quality supreme. It is described as an iron that generates heat by consuming iron itself, corroding the metal it touches and melting the core into its own body. It feeds on iron to create mineral blood. Sehun murmurs that it is done, breathing out a satisfied breath. Ryunha, still hungry-eyed, asks if he is selling the equipment to her after all. He tells her flatly no. She frowns and points out that he had just said it was finished. Before she can press further, Sehun glances toward the doorway and greets Kim In-cheol, who has arrived at exactly the right moment. Kim In-cheol relays that the academy head wishes to proceed with the presentation ceremony immediately. Ryunha, faintly sour, asks if she may take Cadet Lee Sehun with her. Sehun respectfully tells her he will see her later. The heart of Babel Academy, which is the old main building called Marduk Mansion, sits quietly on one side of the central square. Sehun and Kim In-cheol walk through its long, warm-lit corridors. Along the way, the professor lowers his voice and reminds him to behave respectfully in front of the academy head. Not only did they generously handle the small matter of him breaking the auditorium during the demonstration, he says, but the man they are about to meet is on a completely different level from them. The guy simply tells him he does not need to worry. The door opens on the man himself. Waiting on the other side is Ludwig Schubert, the Ascension Emperor and Academy head. Before the regression, this was the hero who perished alone, fighting the demon god of the extermination sky, one of the 6 great demon gods. Ludwig greets him warmly and says, so this must be Cadet Lee Sehun. Our boy sizes him up in a single glance. As expected, he notes silently of a perfectionist. Ludwig tells him that the armaments displayed at today's demonstration were all quite interesting. Sehun replies that he cannot say there were no regrets, but he did have high expectations. Ludwig echoes the word regrets with mild amusement. Sehun explains that he had been prepared for the pieces to fall short, but honestly he still feels like tossing the 5-colored fire blade and the fire-accumulating sheath straight into the furnace. Ludwig chuckles at the honesty. Therefore, he continues, as a tribute to this talent and effort, he will offer 2 rewards. He tells Sehun to tell him what he needs. Without hesitation, Sehun answers that he would like rewards that will increase his mana and memory capacity. Ludwig hums and considers. Then he lifts a hand into empty air. His fingers trace a small gesture and a golden keyhole rotates into being before splitting open into white space. 2 objects tumble out of the void and land softly on the desk. The first is a shard of ink-black light. This is the heavy ink rock grade hero and quality supreme. It is a fragment fallen from the night sky that swallows everything except sunlight and absorbs mana from anything it touches. The second is a pale patterned tusk. This is the dream ivory grade hero and quality medium. It is the tusk of a dream-devouring beast imbued with dreamlike mana that can cross the boundary between reality and dreams. Sehun's eyes widen at the sight of both. Heavy ink rock is rare enough on its own, he thinks, but dream ivory is even harder to find. He admits aloud that both will be difficult to handle right now, but he does have an idea of how to use them. Ludwig asks with a knowing smile if he likes them. Our boy answers plainly that they are perfect. After Sehun leaves the room, another presence stirs somewhere beyond the golden keyhole in the air. A low voice asks Ludwig what he was thinking, giving that boy 2 rewards when no one else has received 2. Ludwig, unbothered, replies that he simply gave them to Sehun because the boy has the capacity to handle them. The other voice muses that this is unlike him and admits that the child does feel oddly experienced. That just means Ludwig answers that he has enough depth for even you to see him that way. And he adds, while watching Sehun shrink into the distance across the central square, that even he cannot fathom that depth. Morning arrives on the first day of classes. In the Borsippa lecture hall, Hans Barmuth holds court at the center of the room. A blonde classmate asks him where he wants to eat lunch. Hans replies casually that he is sorry, but he already has plans with Senior Howard today. A stunned gasp rolls through the room at the mention of the third-year department valedictorian of Borsippa. Hans shrugs it off, telling them that their families are close, so they meet often. The senior offered him some advice on academy life. The other students light up and beg to be brought along. A few work up the courage to walk over and stammer that if it is okay, could they possibly join. Right then the door slides open and Sehun walks calmly inside. The air of the room shifts in an instant. Our boy carries the same look on his face that he might wear stepping out of a battlefield. Every student in the hall feels it. His eyes sweep the room and land on Hans. For a long moment the two just stare at each other. Hans holds his face flat, but his gaze flickers and slips. Some part of him instinctively cowers, as if he is standing in front of something far above him. The young man reads the reaction and quietly notes with satisfaction that Hans seems to have realized his place. He slumps into a seat in the corner. The class's center of gravity, which Hans had been carefully cultivating since orientation, quietly slides across the room. Hans bites his lip and seething curses under his breath at being outshone. Right then, Kim In-cheo pushes open the door. He tells everyone to sit down calmly. Looks like everyone is here. Since this is the first class, they should start with introductions. He wheels a large covered cart to the front, and with one flip of the cloth, reveals a stack of silvery ingots. Each one has a tiny flame burning inside its transparent core. This ingot, he explains, is a material called projection alloy. It is dozens of times more sensitive to mana than common ores. If mana is injected into the interior, he says an armament envisioned in the wielder's mind is easily created. He demonstrates letting a small flame rise from his palm as the alloy melts and reshapes in an instant. A live longsword forms in his hand. The guy inwardly admits that Kim In-cheo did not reach the world's top 100 artisans for nothing, and yet his eyes narrow at the subtle dents running along the blade. He had sensed it during the bondstone test as well. Kim In-cheo is the real deal, but his blacksmithing carries an underlying flaw. Because of this sensitivity, Kim In-cheo continues the alloy is difficult to use as a combat armament, but it reflects unconscious traits, allowing the wielder to reflect on themselves. That is why the armaments made from projection alloy are called alter egos. The refining department's traditional self-introduction, he tells them, will be replaced today by making these alter egos. The finished pieces will be exhibited in the main building for a week, so he expects everyone to do their best. The class responds in unison. The students go up one by one and forge. Sehun watches and quickly loses interest. This much projection alloy would easily exceed 10 million won per piece, he notes. As expected of Babel, even the self-introduction is grandiose. Hans steps up and forges a rapier, drawing appreciative gasps from the fawning crowd. To Sehun's eye, it is pretty on the outside and completely hollow underneath. Actually, he thinks flatly, there is not a single student in this room with the most important talent. Then lastly, Kim In-cheo calls Lee Sehun forward. Our boy replies, stepping up to the podium with the ingot cool in his palm. He weighs it for a moment. Since he is already the department valedictorian, he tells himself there is no need to hide his power. Since he is doing it, a small ember flares to life inside the alloy. Shall he go all out? The blueprint blooms in his mind and mana rushes into the ingot. The entire lecture hall braces for whatever is about to happen next. The exhibition hall of the main building is packed. Students crowd shoulder to shoulder in front of a single towering exhibit, and even from across the room the whispers reach our boy Lee Sehun. There are so many people here, one mutters, and it must be because of Lee Sehun. Another sneers that it is funny how everyone talks about his low level being different, as if a freshman could really be that special. Someone else nods and calls the whole thing coincidence caused by a skill, but the exhibit itself silences those who actually walk up to it. It is a 5-meter sphere bristling with swords and spears and shields and axes and sickles and claws and gauntlets and staves. Each piece is intricately crafted and somehow more refined than the equipment the visitors themselves are wearing. A plate at the base offers an explanation. During the forging, an anomaly occurred in which 19 surrounding projection alloys were absorbed. The department has judged this as a mark of Cadet Lee Sehun's own aptitude, so the piece is displayed as is. The crowd reactions split down the middle. Skeptics dismiss it as a coincidence, or the department pushing a genius narrative because they finally have a valedictorian from the refining department after 12 years. But standing in front of the sphere, Erika Inoue quietly tells the crowd that she thinks a little differently. And beside her, Jake Myers folds his arms and admits that he feels the same. To their eyes, the amount of projection alloy allotted for the display was simply not enough to express Lee Sehun's real potential. Elsewhere on campus, in the metallurgy classroom, Sehun hammers the sword in front of him with a lethal rhythm, clang after clang after clang. Around him, other cadets whisper to each other and check the timing. One asks if the other clocked it. Until now, there has not been a 0.01 second error between his swings. On the podium, the substitute proctor Han In-sung stares at Sehun, and privately wonders what on earth he is supposed to teach a kid like this. His decision is quick. He will just skip Se-hoon entirely. He calls out that class is dismissed. The classroom empties, but Se-hoon lingers. He looks down at the finished swords and his eyes narrow. To his own standards, they are well ground and technically clean, but there is nothing about them worth calling special. His grip tightens on the hammer, and he raises it ready to obliterate his own work. Han In-sung says from behind him, asking if he is planning to break them. Se-hoon turns mildly surprised and greets him. Han In-sung tells him plainly that they need those swords for next week's class. They will be delivered to the market after this week's smithing session, so please do not break them. The guy repeats the word deliver with a small frown. Han In-sung explains that this is how cadets get their budget. Babel provides support based on the track record of weapons sold externally. Unless a student comes from a wealthy family, they should keep this in mind. So he asks what exactly Se-hoon is so unhappy with right now, his body or his mana. Se-hoon answers that for now it is his body. To make training tools for himself, he tells Han In-sung he needs to smith heavy ink rock, but he lacks the stamina to even attempt it. Han In-sung tilts his head thinking, and then throws out a question. If it is necessary for smithing, would not buffs be faster than physical training? Our boy freezes for a small beat. He had not even considered it. Buffing himself while forging was a method he had avoided before regressing. But since he has returned to the past and lacks stamina right now, he thinks with a slow smile he could just smith the heavy ink rock under the effect of a buff. He thanks Han In-sung for the advice, bowing his head. Han In-sung replies that it was nothing. Before he leaves, Se-hoon glances at the sword Han In-sung had forged earlier for demonstration. He tells him casually that when Han In-sung is forging, he is using too much mana. Reduce it to 70% of what it is now, and focus the strike on a single point instead. That will be better for now. He walks out without waiting for a response, leaving Han In-sung standing alone with the sword in his hand. Han In-sung mutters after a long silence, asking if a freshman just gave an assistant pointers. He does not sound angry so much as bewildered. The sky opens above the campus as Se-hoon boards the light rail. Babel encourages autonomous learning for each individual cadet, meaning students may take classes from other departments or take dozens of classes in a single semester. However, the major courses still have to be completed, and any student who accumulates 3 failing grades is immediately expelled. It is free, he reminds himself, but the responsibility is his to carry. The next station is the Department of Sorcery, the intercom announces. He steps off the train and walks straight into an obstacle. A cluster of students blocks his path, and at the center of them stands Erika Inoue. One of them barks at him to stop blocking the way and move. Se-hoon looks past the pack unimpressed and calmly tells them that they are the ones who should move. The atmosphere in the group visibly tightens. Erika, quietly watching the standoff, finally cuts through it and asks him where he is going. Department of Sorcery, he says, wondering if there might be a minor he could take here. Then she will guide him, she replies, without hesitation. Her subordinates immediately break into panic. One of them stammers that the gathering is after this. She tells them flatly that they can go by themselves. But the seniors said they really wanted her to attend. Erika answers quieter and colder that she is not interested. Me is my dears. Walking side by side down the platform, she asks him what kind of minor he is looking for exactly. Something that enhances physical abilities without interfering with smithing, Se-hoon tells her. She considers and then suggests barrier arts. He frowns and points out that those are usually specialized for defense. It can vary, she replies, depending on how they are used. To prove it, she offers a small example. She summons silver mana into her palm and traces a spell across a small object linked with a fine chain. Then she hands it to him. She tells him to try tearing it. Se-hoon grips the chain and pulls with real force, but nothing gives at all. He turns it over in his hand, thinking, did she just increase the durability? No, he realizes almost immediately. It maintains its original properties but hardens under strong force. Erika explains that this technique suits smithing very well because it requires delicate control. For complex applications, she says, he will probably need a professor's help. By the way, she adds, after a beat, this particular spell formula feels oddly familiar. The barrier composition professor married into one of her family's branches, so she can introduce him personally if he wants. In exchange, she begins gesturing toward the small, dark red pendant at the center of the chain. But the young man is not really listening anymore. "This is it," he says quietly, and the chain tears clean in his hands. Erica's eyes widen at the sight. She murmurs that he had understood the family's barrier arts in that short time, and then dismantled it. Our boy shrugs and admits that barrier arts definitely seem useful. He thanks her for the advice and says he is going to register for classes now. She can go grab a meal or something with those guys who have been following her from behind. He turns and walks off. Erica's subordinates rush to her, asking if she is all right and if he did anything strange to her. She does not answer them at all. She stares only at the crumpled remains of what she had handed him, at the broken chain lying discarded on the pavement, at the letters spelling out the word noblesse across the ruined casing, the invitation she murmurs to herself. Noblesse is the social gathering of Babel's most elite students, the one everyone is desperate to receive. She had given it to him wrapped inside a barrier her own family had cast, and he had shredded it in a single motion without even noticing. Slowly, coldly, her gaze lifts and locks onto his retreating figure. She calls after him. The word carries down the walkway, and it sounds like the start of something serious. "Biron thimi." The department of sorcery hums with morning traffic and quiet gossip. Students on the walkways lean toward each other and murmur that Erica Inoue is walking with a boy from another department again. One of them thinks he saw the two together yesterday. Another remembers seeing them at the last exhibition as well. Watching this from the corner of his eye, our boy Lee Sahun sighs at how quickly the false rumors are spreading. If Erica really had feelings for him, he tells himself a bond would have already formed under his unique skill. Setting that aside, he asks her if the sorcery department really picks and chooses who takes their classes. Erica answers that she applied for the barrier composition class, but they told her to come take a test first. "Tainmajaned UDXMEM, Tamamohif, Tamo." This is the test site for barrier composition, she tells him. Sehun looks at the trees and asks if this whole forest is really the test. Nearby, other applicants are stumbling through the undergrowth, cursing under their breath about where on earth the goal is. Are they doing a treasure hunt for the test, our boy wonders, because this looks annoying. Did they hide the answer somewhere inside a barrier or something? He walks forward on pure instinct, following the pull in his gut, and steps out of the trees into a wide clearing before he even realizes it. An examiner with a stopwatch blinks at him and stammers that he has just passed the test. Sehun says, "Pardon," genuinely confused. "Ma naimain Sion?" Somewhere else on campus, in a quiet office, the professor of barrier composition at is not pleased. Robert Perry is a man tied to the Inoue family by both loyalty and blood, since his own wife hails from one of their branches. He stares at his phone with a tired sigh. An assistant has just shown him a photo of Erica and Sehun standing face to face, and now the pieces are clicking together. The young lady has shown interest in Borsippa's department valedictorian, so that is why she suddenly applied for a basic lecture. Applicants have tripled thanks to her, Perry mutters, but he cannot exactly be happy about it. Since there was also a request from the young master, Inoue Perry decides that this year they will be adding a special filter using the disorienting soul labyrinth. It is a barrier that distorts the senses to make wanderers lose their way. Basic in principle, but anyone unfamiliar with sorcery would not even be able to detect it in the first place. He watches from a distance as Sehun walks straight through the invisible maze without pausing once. The young lady did not even help him, Perry notes to himself with narrowed eyes, and yet he broke through the disorienting soul labyrinth on instinct alone. Perry gathers the applicants who managed to reach the clearing. He begins by straightening his coat. Everyone here has passed the first test. Starting now, he tells them they will be separated into class tiers through a second test. A red-haired cadet steps forward eagerly and declares that he will go first. His eyes slide sideways at Erica. This is his chance, he tells himself, to catch her attention at last. Perry accepts and explains that the second test is simple. Dismantle the active barrier in front of them using only mana. He will grade them by time, so they should be quick and accurate. He calls out, "Begin," and a spiderweb-shaped barrier of red mana blooms out of the ground, with its core a single crimson spider sitting at the center. The red-haired cadet lays both hands on the web and pushes his mana in. Sensing his intrusion, the spider skitters along the strands, endlessly fleeing. The web regenerates in every direction the moment he tears at it. To surround the entire spell formula through the standard method would demand more mana than he has to spare. In that case, he decides through gritted teeth he will pressure it with pure speed instead. He hammers at the web harder and faster still. 2 minutes and 23 seconds later, Perry clicks his stopwatch. He comments that the cadet needed to pay more attention to grasping the structure, though not bad overall. Erica, standing at the back, offers a small murmur that it was not bad. The cadet thanks her with cheeks warming and steps aside. Then Perry calls next and next and next until every remaining applicant has either finished poorly or failed outright. Perry sorts them all into the basic class. Then at last it is Erica and Nue's turn at the mark. Perry tells her to please begin. She lifts a hand toward the barrier's center and lets silvery mana ripple outward. The whole spell formula unravels from the edges inward and collapses in one smooth wave, with the spider crumbling with it. The other applicants gape at how she pulled it off that fast. She dismantled the entire structure and let the barrier fall on its own weight. Someone whispers reverently that this is the department valedictorian. Perry clicks his stopwatch at 22 seconds. He tells her it was fine, but the standard dismantling method would likely have been about 2 seconds faster. Erica replies calmly that she will keep that in mind. Lastly, Perry calls Lee Se-hoon forward. The guy steps to the mark with hands loose at his sides. The other applicants glance at each other and quietly note that he does not look like anything special at all. Perry mutters that they will just have to find out now. He swings his hand across the ground to draw a fresh spiderweb barrier out of the earth. Se-hoon looks at the barrier with a slow sound, and then something quiet flickers behind his eyes. Around him, the crowd shifts uneasily and mutters that he does not seem to know the timer has already started. But our boy is not really listening to any of them. He is staring at the barrier and thinking to himself that it carries aspects that resemble heavy ink rock. It is the very fact he realizes that if a strike does not reach a certain threshold, the barrier repairs itself and reverts. Therefore, he thinks to properly smith heavy ink rock, one must inject all the stimulation simultaneously, matching the ratios exactly. Perry frowns and asks aloud what on earth this cadet is doing. One of the assistants starts to press, but Erica cuts them off calmly and tells them to leave him be. Perry watches and waits without interrupting. Then Se-hoon breathes out and lets his right hand ignite with scarlet flame. Then what if, he asks himself softly, he could hold on to the accumulated stimulation right inside the heavy ink rock itself? He lays his burning palm against the center of the spiderweb. The flame spreads along the strands, tracing every line, and the whole formula dissolves in a single sweep. Done, our boy says quietly. Then a small blueprint blooms in his mind, and he sees it fully. It is a bracelet exact in structure and embedded magic circuit, capable of holding accumulated stimulation the way he had just held the spiderweb's mana in place. With this, he clenches his fist and grins openly. He can finally smith heavy ink rock. He turns and strides straight out of the clearing without another word to anyone. Perry watches him leave and glances down at his stopwatch. 7 minutes and 45 seconds. He then tells the remaining group quietly that how much time it took is meaningless. It took 7 minutes now, sure, but the next time Lee Se-hoon encounters the same barrier, he will destroy it in mere seconds. He did not simply dismantle the barrier in front of him. He created an entire formula for dismantling the spell. Sorcery is added to his smithing skills, Perry murmurs, watching that retreating figure disappear into the trees. He is honestly afraid of what kind of item that young man might create. Somewhere in a quiet Babel administration office, the day's request board lights up. A ping goes out to every professor in the Department of Blacksmithing. Workshop Safety Rule Article 8 requires a supervisor for any intermediate smithing session using hero-tier materials, or above, and top-year cadet Lee Se-hoon has just filed an application. Reply chimes go off one after another as the chat window overflows within seconds. Even Vice Dean Michael Barmouth's Faction 1 staff member, notes with a raised eyebrow, has not sent a single response. The rumor was that the atmosphere over there had been terrible ever since Vice Dean Michael's son slipped to second place, and it must actually be true. Then he tells himself he should start picking a supervisor at random. Just before he can, one final message arrives that silences the whole room. The dean says she will personally oversee Cadet Lee Se-hoon's intermediate smithing. Down in the workshop, Ryu Yun-ha is already leaning against the wall, with arms folded, when our boy Lee Se-hoon walks in with heavy work gloves and a soot-streaked apron. She greets him quietly and says it has been a while. Se-hoon blinks in mild surprise at seeing the dean herself here. She tells him plainly that he must be busy indeed to come all the way to a place like this. As the dean, she has come here to personally verify his skills. Since it has come to this, our boy tells her with a small tired smile, he will simply have to work hard on making it. He turns toward the furnace and starts prepping the materials. Heavy ink rock smithing, step 1. There are many ways to handle heavy ink rock, Se-hoon reminds himself, but the most difficult method among them is the dark curtain process. He seals the ore inside a lightless container and then separates its impurities using only mana, coaxing the material as it spreads inside the dark. In this process, the size of the heavy ink rock will decrease, but its purity will increase. Easy to say, he admits inwardly, but this is practically reconstructing matter itself. He works with methodical focus while Ryu Eunha watches with curiosity sharpening on her face. When he lifts the finished piece out, it has been reduced to a perfect square, about a quarter of its original size. Is 1/4 really the best he can do, he wonders. Any further and the performance will not be sufficient. On to step 2. He kindles crimson flames in his palm, and then filters mana through them until only the right kind of fire remains. A pale green flame flickers into existence in his hand. This stabilized fire is what he calls flowing wildfire, and it possesses the property of holding the exact temperature from the moment it was formed. On to step 3. He wraps the hammerhead in flowing wildfire and begins striking the ore. The key, he reminds himself, is not to rest until the distortion around the ore fully diminishes under the wildfire's cooling nature. From the sidelines, Ryu Eunha watches with quiet concern. Even if he has immunity to fire, she thinks silently, that does not mean he does not feel pain. How much has our boy already whittled himself away just to get to this point? 4 hours of hammering pass. The properties of the heavy ink rock, having absorbed the flame to its limit, finally begin to change. Se-hoon breathes out, wiping sweat from his brow. Done, he says. Just like that, the distortion has finally stopped. He melts the processed heavy ink rock down, and to Ryu Eunha's outright surprise, walks it straight to a pre-prepared mold, rather than back to the anvil. She says, alarmed, that he is casting, not forging. The properties will shift because of the darkness sealed inside that mold, so what on earth is he thinking? She half rises to intervene, but Se-hoon simply plunges his right hand into the boiling dark of the mold, without hesitation. On to step 4. He uses the barrier dismantling formula he had figured out during the sorcery test to slow the changes inside the heavy ink rock. In that brief window of held time, he constructs a full mana circuit inside the metal itself. A soft chime goes off in his ears. The armament ink spider bracelet has been completed. To break prejudice, the system tells him a daring challenge that spares nobody is necessary. Though the potential of the material was not fully drawn out, the blacksmith's skill in forging new possibilities is worthy of being called first-rate. Then a second window blooms in front of him. He has acquired the skill blacksmith thread at grade D. The finished piece is a matte black bracelet engraved with fine web-like patterns, rated as grade rare and quality medium. It absorbs the wearer's mana, growing heavier proportionally to the amount stored, and enables the armament skill explosive ring. The guy murmurs success to himself. Ryu Eunha steps forward and examines the 4 completed bracelets sitting on the workbench. Her eyes widen. She asks slowly if this is a resonance phenomenon, because that is genuinely impressive. Yes, Se-hoon answers. Though it is not that strong on its own, if done right, he adds, they could aim for a proper set effect down the line. Se-hoon apologizes for not being able to give her a proper armament when she is going through all this trouble because of him. He does not know if it will work as a palate cleanser, he tells her, but she can have this at least. He hands her the leftover mold. Her unique skill, soul-smelting furnace, sparks awake in her eyes as she takes it. She munches on the cast fragments, crunching them, and her crimson hair shimmers faintly with each bite. She reports deadpan that it is quite edible. Metaphorically speaking, it tastes like fried crumbs. Generous of her, Se-hoon thinks silently to himself. Has it become a habit of his to make even the byproducts suit Ryu Eunha's taste? He could raise the bond level rather easily with just this. Between bites, she asks him when he plans to deal with the 5-color fireblade and the fire-accumulating sheath. He does not intend to sell them right now, he answers plainly. She asks if the price was insufficient. Not at all, he says. He is keeping them in preparation for the subjugation class. And he adds with a slight grin that there is a saying that hunger is the best spice. Once he has equipment truly worthy of giving her, he promises he will tell her first. Ryu Unha simply nods and says that she will be looking forward to it. She notes the session is done and tells him to leave the cleanup to the staff. That is a relief, our boy admits, because he has nothing left in his legs. He tries to stand and the room lurches sideways. Ryu Unha catches him under the arm before he can hit the floor and asks if he is all right. He answers sheepishly that he must have distributed his stamina a little poorly. She informs him she will take him to his dorm herself. Then, out of nowhere, she asks if he happens to have a fear of heights. He begins to say that he does not. "Here we go," Ryu Unha announces. She scoops him up under the knees and holds him firmly against her. The tips of her red hair ignite with a vermilion glow. Her toes barely brush the floor before both of them are already airborne. Question marks paint themselves all over Sehun's face as the night skyline of Borsippa rushes past below him. He calculates it inwardly and cannot quite believe the number he is landing on. That single leftover mold she just ate drew this much power out of her. In many ways, our boy realizes as the wind rushes past his ears, the situation has changed a lot from before he regressed. Somewhere below them, at the entrance of the Department of Blacksmithing's main building, a lone figure with waist-long black hair waits patiently in the dim light. Lee Se-hoon is not here yet, Erika Inoue murmurs to herself, gripping something small and pale in her hand. She still needs to give him the invitation. Somewhere on the Babel-free board tab open to the Refining Department subforum, an anonymous post lights up the thread. The author asks why this person is here. Is that not the Freshman Department valedictorian? She has been standing in front of the Refining Department main building for 3 hours now. The comments explode within seconds. One anon suggests she is waiting for the Borsippa Department valedictorian because she waited at the dorms for him before too. Another shoots back that she would have just called him down. In his own room, our boy Lee Se-hoon scrolls through the whole thing with a slow blink. He asks himself what this is. He decides that if it was something important, whoever it was will simply come find him again, and puts the phone down. Later that morning, a broad-shouldered man in a red bandana and a black tank top walks into the Understanding Tools classroom. He cheerfully introduces himself as Regressed Miles. He will be in charge of the class starting today. So nice to meet everyone. First, though, they should move to the training center. The last one to arrive runs 20 laps around the track. Go, he adds, and the classroom detonates. One cadet cries mid-sprint, asking what this is all of a sudden. Was this not supposed to be a theory class? Se-hoon just tells the guy running beside him that he does not know and to keep running. And of course, dragging 4 ink spider bracelets that grow heavier every step of the way he arrives dead last. 20 laps, Ricaros informs him with a straight face. Yes, our boy sighs and says he is going. Other cadets exchange glances and mutter that his stamina is genuinely bottom tier. They wonder aloud if he even did the intermediate smithing session properly. Se-hoon just keeps running with his head down. Now attention, Ricaros calls out to the group. Originally, Understanding Tools was a theory class on the structure of armaments. However, because of the recent flame blade hunts, which are attacks targeting blacksmiths who craft hero-grade or higher fire attribute blades, their methods have changed. Even before his regression, Se-hoon reminds himself internally as he runs it was an unsolved case. No matter what defenses you prepare, Ricaros continues in the end, all that remains is your own body. Therefore, while learning to understand tools in this class, they will also acquire techniques to protect themselves. The cadets shout their acknowledgement in unison, and Ricaros grins. Good. Today they will cover swords. The guy inwardly tells himself he needs to be a bit more careful this time, and to do that, he needs to raise his stamina first. As he keeps running, our boy runs a quick internal audit on the bracelet. He made it himself, sure, but the performance is certainly effective. Explosive ring manipulates gravity within a 10-meter radius around him, and his stats have all crept up by an average of 5 points across the board. Strength has climbed to E68, and durability to E63, and mana to F47, and agility to E52. His unique skill remains Blacksmith of Bonds. His attribute mana is Crimson Flame at F. His possessed skills read Artisan of Flame at C, and Black Spirit Thread at D. Before the first year ends, he tells himself he will make this body usable, no matter what it takes. Ricaros barks at him from the side of the field, telling him to stop running and come here. Sehun walks over sweating buckets. To Rikuros's surprise, the cadet's core is still stable and well aligned. He admits with a small chuckle that Sehun is in better shape than he thought. He tosses Sehun a training sword and tells him to swing it however he sees fit. That is how the professor will judge if swordsmanship suits him. Sehun slowly rolls his shoulders and takes the sword. It will be hard to move properly because of the ink spider bracelet, he mutters. He thinks for a moment about whether he should try using that. He settles into a low stance and swings. To the other cadets, it looks slow and exhausted, but Rikuros's eyes narrow. One cadet murmurs from the crowd that his form is not bad. No, Rikuros thinks silently it is excellent. His sword knows the path it must take. However, Sehun is being too hasty about it. Rikuros decides quietly. It would be better to address this before moving on. He steps in and clashes forward. Then in the fraction of a second before his sword can properly parry, Rikuros's eyes go wide at something in the trajectory that he cannot quite name. His body flinches back on pure reflex. He recovers and stares at his own hands, disbelieving. Did he just get scared of a technical cadet, he asks himself? Enough to hallucinate something that dangerous. He asks quieter than before, who taught Sehun that swordsmanship. Sehun shrugs sheepishly and admits he does not quite know why it even worked. In a small flash of memory, an old man is teaching him a sword technique on the fly. The old man cheerfully claims he cooked it up in about 10 minutes and would gladly take the technique as payment for the overdue tab. Sehun simply tells Rikuros he just watched videos of other heroes' battles online. Rikuros considers him for a long moment. Swordsmanship, he says. Is Sehun interested in learning it properly? He will write a letter of recommendation for the body control lecture at Kharkiv. That afternoon, Sehun reaches the small classroom, tucked away in the far corner of the martial arts building. Behind the door, an old man is shouting at a blonde young student clinging to his pants. He asks how many times he has to tell the kid he has nothing to teach him. The blonde student begs him not to be like that. The young man walks in and stops cold. The old man is a face he knows. Retired S-class hero and regular customer, the memory tag lights up in his own mind. Swordbreaker Ma Guangsu. The guy who was addicted to gambling and only drank booze, our boy thinks in flat disbelief, was actually a professor here. Ma Guangsu barks, asking who he is. Sehun introduces himself as Sehun, a freshman in the refining department, arriving with a recommendation from Professor Rikuros. The blonde young man asks in mild surprise if Rikuros recommended him. Someone adds that this guy is this year's Borsippa department valedictorian. Ma Guangsu scans Sehun from head to toe with an unimpressed frown. No matter how he looks at him, he mutters he seems mediocre. Then after a pause, he sharpens his stare and asks if Sehun really wants to learn from him this badly. Yes, Sehun answers plainly without hesitation. Ma Guangsu smirks at the reply. Then, if he beats that guy, he will accept him as a student. He points to the blonde student, who is of course Jake Myers, Kharkiv's own valedictorian. It will be a single match, 1 round only, and the one who lands the first valid hit wins. Ma Guangsu raises his hand and calls out, "Begin." Jake bursts forward at frightening speed. Sehun settles his weight low, and then quietly asks himself if the movement he is watching is what he thinks it is. Is Jake maximizing his flexibility by removing strength from his body? If so, the standard counter is grappling, not striking. He loosens his own posture in kind. From the sideline, Ma Guangsu lets out a bored sigh. This is why he hates hotshots. Focusing on mind games before even properly clashing. No fun in that at all. Then Sehun suddenly dashes forward, Munj in embarrassingly weak. Jake casually swats the training sword out of his hands and grabs Sehun's right arm to pin him down. Ma Guangsu leans in with a raised eyebrow, but then Sehun says explosive ring under his breath. The bracelet around his left wrist ignites with a cold blue glow. Gravity buckles around the two of them, twisting the axis of the fight sideways. Their bodies are yanked in a direction that no floor should ever go, and both of them slam into the ground with a heavy thud. Sehun lands with a pained sound and then rolls up onto his elbow. His right fist, still moving through the fall, catches Jake clean across the nose. A small line of blood traces down. Our boy asks with a small satisfied grin if he was a bit faster. Jake, blinking in shock, does not have an answer. Ma Guangsu, wordless, just watches. The dust has not even settled before Ma Guangsu turns to Jake with the flat expression of a man who has ruled and is not to be argued with. He tells everyone to get out. Jake blurts in confusion. Our boy Lee Se-hoon points out from the floor that he believes he said he would teach him if he won. And since Jake is clearly the one who has just been beaten, should Ma Guangsu not be teaching him instead? Ma Guangsu tilts his head mildly amused and admits that to think the Akarkuf valedictorian was beaten by a Borsippa cadet, just hearing it sounds pathetic. Jake, with blood still under his nose, cannot even argue with the framing. That is true, he admits eventually. He supposes he should make himself competent enough to earn his keep at least. Ma Guangsu nods once at the answer and then simply says one more word, then. Jake bows so fast his head almost hits his chest and thanks the professor. He will set a time and send it to Se-hoon and asks him to please show up then. Ma Guangsu tells them both to get going if they are done, but our boy stops him at the door. He has something to discuss with this guy alone. Ma Guangsu tells him to show him the sword technique he used on Ricaros. Understood, Se-hoon replies, and executes the move cleanly across the wooden floor. He charges in, but his sword is knocked out of his hand. Ma Guangsu watches without moving a muscle. Once Se-hoon has finished, the professor delivers his verdict flatly. The concept is good, but the execution is crude. He asks if Se-hoon really thinks swordsmanship that becomes a weakness from the second time onwards is normal. If someone had taught this to others claiming it was any good, Ma Guangsu would have broken their limbs. In Se-hoon's head, a small mental arrow points directly at Ma Guangsu himself, but he keeps that observation firmly to himself. Ma Guangsu chuckles darkly. Just watch, he says. He will build a proper body onto that skeletal technique. So that means Se-hoon is enrolled in the class, right? Se-hoon confirms. Well, yes, Ma Guangsu answers grudgingly. Then Se-hoon says he will be going for today and walks out. Ma Guangsu watches the door swing shut and mutters to himself that the kid is so stiff, acting all high and mighty when this is just after service. Out in the hallway, Jake catches up with a shout, and Se-hoon turns back to look at him. He asks if Jake has not left yet. Jake grins and pulls out something small from his jacket, a square envelope sealed with red wax. He has something he wanted to give him. Se-hoon begins to ask what it is, and something clicks in his head. It is an invitation to Noblesse, basically a gathering place where cadets from prestigious families meet. In the back of his mind, Se-hoon quietly wonders if this is the very thing Erica had been trying to give him earlier. Jake shrugs and says there are a lot of stuck-up jerks at Noblesse, but he thinks it will be a good opportunity for Se-hoon. The guy is not sure if he should just accept something like this. Thanks to him, Jake explains earnestly, he got into the class. He should at least show this much gratitude. Se-hoon says thanks quietly and pockets it. Walking on alone through the shopping district, Se-hoon runs through what he has so far. The minors he has applied for are barrier composition and body control. He wants to try a minor from the Borsippa side too. Right now what comes to mind is curses and alchemy and enchanting. Mid-thought, his shoulder bumps into someone coming the other way. He starts to apologize and cannot finish because a hand has already grabbed his wrist. He looks up and sees a young woman. She is staring at the ink spider bracelet on his left arm with intense focus. She has thick, curly chestnut hair and small round glasses and huge, unsettlingly green eyes. She asks in a small voice if he made this bracelet. Our boy, mildly puzzled, tests the waters with a small counter-question of what if he did. She smirks slowly and asks if she could enchant it for him. A small system window rises in his vision. A bond with the target, Leah Claudel, has been established. Leah Claudel, Se-hoon notes as her nameplate blooms in his memory. Someone who raised an armaments grade by 2 whole ranks via enchanting. A genius who created a legendary armament. The person said to have shattered the enchanter industry in his original timeline. And she is right here on the sidewalk, 3 years ahead of him at Babel. Leah mutters to herself, immediately poring over the bracelet with sparkling eyes. Heavy ink rock at rare grade, she says, and starts sketching plans in the air with her fingers. If she just adds a few formulas here. No, it is too good to end with just this. No. What is she going to do about this problem? The young man watches her spiral and asks evenly if the armament is not good. That is not the problem at all, Leah protests. The problem is that there is too much she wants to do with it. It is made of heavy ink rock, so why is the compatibility so unreasonably good? There are so many formulas she could insert that she cannot decide. If that is the case, Sehun tells her, then it should be fine. She blinks up at him with a confused look. He tells her flatly that there is more where this came from. Also, he adds, there is a resonance phenomenon between them, so keep that in mind. Leah's eyes light up. A shadow falls across them. A dark-haired young man in a black jacket steps up, and his voice cuts the conversation clean in half. He asks Sehun coldly what in the world he is. Leah introduces him proudly on his behalf. Lee Sehun, first year in the refining department, and this year's Borsapa department valedictorian. First year, the stranger repeats and pauses in mild disbelief that this is actually amazing. Then he steadies himself and tells Sehun he has something to say and asks if he would follow him for a moment. Erica's lackey Sehun guesses to himself immediately. Lee barks at the newcomer, asking if he cannot see they were talking first. The lackey, whose name is Seats, replies that he wants to resolve this quietly and is only asking for just a moment. Fine Sehun shrugs and tells him to say it right here. Seats sighs deeply before answering. He tells Sehun to apologize for being rude to Lady Erica. Sehun tore the invitation the lady gave him right in front of everyone. Sehun just stares at him blankly. He says that lady told him to tear it though. Sure, Seats replies and says he has a point. If only he had not also received an invitation from Myers. Sehun lets out one small laugh. He asks if Erica sent him. No, Seats answers and says he is acting on his own. Yeah, right, Leah calls over her glasses with a bright malicious smile. She asks if there is anyone in Babel who does not already know Seats is the young master's servant. The mask across Seats' face cracks in an instant. He spits something angry and something shimmers into the air. Small dark daggers appear around them. Leah is knocked sideways with a startled cry. Sehun slides back on his heels and stares. Seats breathes out slowly through his teeth. He tells Sehun he might be under the delusion that he is someone special right now, but Babel is full of people far superior to him. Our boy replies evenly, asking if by that Seats is talking about himself. Seats snarls at him to shut up and lunges forward. Blades flash all around them in tight arcs. Sehun dodges once and twice and catches the tail of a slice with the edge of his sleeve. As he thought, he notes to himself, while ducking under another dagger, it was not just made of mana. Did Seats use the daggers themselves as a medium to make attacks that can still wound while remaining technically illusions? Seats asks in genuine shock how Sehun figured that out. Who knows, Sehun answers and shifts his stance. It sounded absolutely delicious, he adds under his breath. A system window blooms in the air. Bond imprint gluttony iron is activated. His right hand flushes a dark red instantly, and Seats' whole expression collapses at the sight. He wails about his 1,000,001 as one of his daggers dissolves clean into Sehun's palm drawn in. The imprint that lights up in Sehun's vision reads Bond Ryu Yunha Gluttony Iron Grade High Quality Supreme. It describes an iron that creates heat by devouring iron, corroding metal on contact, and melting cores into its own interior. Remaining durability sits at 78%. With a taste like this, Sehun hears Ryu Inha's memory echo in his head. No wonder she would go crazy. Sehun says explosive ring, quiet and cold. The ink spider bracelet glows blue at his wrist, and gravity buckles around the two of them. Their bodies are yanked sharply upward and then slammed back down to the ground with a crack that shakes the pavement itself. Seats simply goes still on the tile. Our boy stands over him, breathing steady with one shoulder rolled loose. Back on the sidewalk with the fight cleaned up behind them, Leah skips up next to him with her hands folded behind her back and her eyes shining. She calls to him brightly as senior. Sehun answers her with a cautious sound. She asks if there is a lecture in the enchantment department he would recommend. Our boy, sensing the shape of the setup before it lands, looks away toward the horizon. Ancient enchanting Leah sings songs delighted with herself. There is also an amazing senior named Leah Claudel there, she adds. Sehun lets out a small, quiet groan into the sky. Deep in a narrow back alley of Babel, Seats leans against a cold stone wall with sweat running down his temple. He mutters that damn it, to think a mere freshman could have such a reaction speed. He is still turning the shame of the fight over in his head when a soft voice slides into the alley. Very politely, the voice asks him if she may take a look at that dagger. Seats' whole body jolts upright, and his eyes go wide when he sees who is standing there. He blurts out Lady Erica and asks since when she has been standing there. Erica Inoue does not answer. Long dark hair falls neatly across her shoulders as she extends one gloved hand, and Seats surrenders the small blade almost on reflex. She lifts it into the pale light. Very quietly she tells him that he does not need to report this to her brother. She will speak to the family head separately about it. Seats manages a weak acknowledgement and lowers his head. Erica's calm gaze narrows on the runes glowing faintly along the dagger's spine, and her mind sharpens into cold focus. As she suspected, this weapon was used as a catalyst for a counter skill, and there is even an anti-theft enchantment engraved on it. She turns the blade over once, and a single quiet thought passes behind her golden eyes. Did that boy really craft a counter skill based on her own magic and Professor Robert's magic at once? Her internal reassessment writes itself in one clean stroke. Lee Se-hoon's aptitude in the smithing arts could be even higher than S grade, she decides. She will have to adjust his magic aptitude evaluation upward to A. Somewhere across campus, entirely unaware of any of this, our boy is walking to his next class when a familiar chime rings inside his head. The system window lights up softly to inform him that a bond with the target Eiko Inoue has been established. Se-hoon steps slow, and he blinks at the window with a puzzled tilt of his head. What on earth is this, he wonders. His mind runs through the last hour and lands on the obvious answer. Did she peek at him fighting that subordinate guy in the alley? He sighs to himself and decides that, well, at least he has been properly compensated. The new material feels a little crude to use as it is, but it should absolutely be usable in combination with the black spirit thread he already carries. Anyway, he mutters, filing it away for later. He had actually been looking forward to just sitting in Professor Kim In-chil's class today and listening to some proper theory. But to think he already knows this entire day's lecture inside and out from a life he lived before. The lecture hall settles into place around him. At the front of the room stands a tall figure with silver-white hair swept back from a lined face. A trim silver beard runs along his strong jaw, and calm gray eyes sit above a dark buttoned shirt. This is Professor Kim In-chil. He steadies his hands on the desk and announces to the room that the explanation seems sufficient, so they will now start in earnest. Even if it is the exact same metal, he tells them the form changes completely depending on how the mana arrangement is modified. He raises one palm and a rough black iron shape twists lazily in the air above his fingers, morphing from a disc into a spiral into a jagged blade in a matter of heartbeats. This application of metal deformation, he explains, is what determines the versatility of a weapon. That is why if a student wishes to be a blacksmith, they must perfectly grasp the potential of the metal they are handling. Today, he says, they will practice metal deformation using these iron ingots. He walks the cadets through the first exercise with brisk cheer. First, they must manipulate the mana arrangement to create a scratch which needs to sit about 3 centimeters deep at the center of the ingot. This item has been adjusted to react sensitively to deformation, so they must handle it carefully. A small, warm glimmer passes behind his eyes as he watches Se-hoon settle over his workbench. He thinks to himself that it seems this cadet did not completely reject magic smithing methods after all. The time limit is 10 minutes, he announces, and they may begin now. Almost at once, a strangled yelp cracks the silence. Hans Barmut, blonde hair falling into panicked eyes, stares at his ingot and gasps, asking why this is happening. It is not going back to its original shape. 2 rows away, Se-hoon and another cadet lower their hands almost at the same moment and murmur that they are finished. Kim In-chil nods once and tells them that, all right, the 2 of them may move on to the next stage. For the next round, Hans redoubles his focus. The professor demonstrates a new mana arrangement as an example and asks them to try applying it. Hans watches Se-hoon match the professor's speed and completeness beat for beat. His whole face lights up with a manic grin. This time he thinks he can win. Then the professor shows the next arrangement, more complex and more delicate. Now is his time, Hans thinks, and he pours everything into perfecting it in front of the whole class. He wants everyone to see. Instead, the mana arrangement collapses under his hands, and the shape locks in place, ruined. Hans stares down at the mangled ingot, and his voice cracks with disbelief as he wonders aloud why this happened. The mana arrangement is completely ruined. Kim In-chil lets the silence land for a beat before he speaks. That iron ingot could not withstand the deformation just now, he tells them evenly. In other words, it means the processing method was wrong from the very start. Han stammers that he only followed what the professor told them. The professor's eyes soften, but his voice does not. What he said earlier, he reminds them, is that they must perfectly grasp the potential of the metal itself. If it becomes impossible to restore the manipulated arrangement, the equipment does not become deformed, but instead becomes deteriorated. That becomes a major variable in quality and performance, so they should revisit this part carefully in the future. Hans lowers his head and murmurs that he will keep that in mind. The professor's gaze slides sideways to Sehun. Did that boy notice it? He wonders inwardly. Then he shakes his head faintly and decides that no, maybe he just got lucky while spacing out. Then Sehun lifts his palm and his own ingot shifts smoothly under a new mana arrangement without a single tremor, and it works. Kim In-chelm goes very still. Around the room, whispers ripple up. One cadet murmurs, asking, did he not just say that would not work? Another breathes under his breath that no way. The professor says, Cadet Lee Sehun at last, keeping his voice very level. He asks if Sehun can show him the deformation he just performed again. The young man inwardly winces at the request. Oops, he thinks he made the professor get the wrong idea. He tells the professor plainly that it is possible because it is an iron ingot specifically adjusted for cadets. It would have been impossible with a standard iron ingot. Kim In-chelm exhales quietly and answers that he sees. So it was possible because it was a sensitivity-adjusted iron ingot. Under his breath, he adds a stunned thought that to think even he would miss that. His mind travels back through decades to a name burned into every blacksmith's memory. Lee Ken-saint of Holy Fire, a summit climber, and the greatest blacksmith of his age. He created the truth of iron during his days as an S-rank hero, and it has not been disproven in the decades since. That deformation formula sits at the very core of every blacksmith's craft. Kim In-chel studies our boy from the corner of his eye. He could not have found another way, right, he thinks. Does he really think it would be possible for this guy? If Sehun notices this a second time, then it will be the second time. Class dismissed, the professor announces. Cadet Lee Sehun, he calls, and asks if he has a moment. Sehun walks up to the podium and asks what the matter is. Kim In-chel produces a small case and slides it across the surface. It is an admission gift, he tells him quietly, because this cadet helped him a great deal to come to Babel in the first place. Inside the case rests a deep red gem, faceted and glowing. A soft system window blossoms in Sehun's vision. Crimson fire jade grade, rare quality high. Ore containing the essence of the crimson flame. Possesses a specialized ability to melt mixed ores into liquid. If he absorbs the essence of the crimson fire jade, Kim In-chel explains, he can permanently strengthen his crimson flame. He prepared it because he had heard Sehun can handle the crimson flame. The guy answers with a bow of his head that thank you, this will definitely be a big help. Also, the professor adds, he wanted to ask if Sehun had any intention of taking the minor course he teaches. Sehun asks if he is talking about armament fundamental studies. Kim In-chel raises an eyebrow and asks if he knows of it. Yes, he does, Sehun answers. Inside his head, he thinks that it is a class with one of the largest budgets supported by Babel. He wonders quietly what he should do. His memory turns over the answer very carefully. Before regressing, he had never even heard the name Kim In-chel, which means this professor's ending in that life was probably not good. But right now, this professor is receiving a great deal of attention on campus. Sehun lifts his eyes and answers. He will take the course. The professor tilts his head with mild concern and asks if he will be okay. He knows Sehun has already applied for quite a few minor courses. With this one, it will only be the fourth, our boy answers evenly. Only the professor echoes with a small dry laugh. Then he says, extending his hand, that he looks forward to working with him. Their palms meet, and the system window chimes softly through Sehun's mind. Extracting bond from target Kim In-chel. The bond with creator Lee Sehun is level 1. A rough metal ingot forms in his mind's eye and blooms with fire at its heart. Bond of Kim In-chel, flame-bearing iron grade, high quality mid-low, a metal that contains flames. It possesses properties similar to wood and can store flames inside. That evening alone in the quiet, Sehun sits cross-legged with the crimson fire jade cradled between his palms and thinks the whole thing through. If someone can extract a metal from a person, he reasons, it means they can also forge and process a person's body. When multiple attribute mana exist within one body, they cause a conflict. Since this is fatal for a blacksmith who requires precision, the norm has been established to only use the one attribute which best matches a smith's aptitude. He himself, however, is different from every other blacksmith on this campus. The internal mana that used to block the heat has been appropriately depleted. His body has been drained of the essence of the crimson flame. What he must do as a blacksmith is construct a mana circuit solely for the crimson flame inside his body. And only then, our boy tells himself, as red light climbs the shape of a burning hammer in his mind, will he truly be smithing it within himself. The response arrives in a cascade. Attribute mana has been strengthened and Crimson Flame F rises to E+. Then a heavier chime lands. He has acquired the S-grade skill Spirit Body Smithing Magic. The body is the most primal material a blacksmith can polish. As internal mana circuits are smithed and enhanced physical abilities rise. All of the stats have increased significantly due to the skill's effect. Strength D105, Durability D100, Mana D119, Agility E82. Sehun stares down at his own hand as it hums with new heat. Spirit Body Smithing Magic, he murmurs. A memory drifts back to him at the same moment. A mentor's voice sharpened into a lesson he refuses to forget. He has the materials in his hand, that voice tells him. Yet he was about to give up without even thinking about how to handle them. He is not an idiot, so is he really just going to accept that? Sehun closes his fingers around the jade and answers under his breath that yes, that is right. He has to make use of everything he can. And whether he is facing an ally or an enemy this time around, he tells himself as the lamplight throws his shadow long across the dorm floor, he will not have any regrets this time. The clock tower of Babel glints in the morning sun as Kim In-cheol steps onto the workshop platform for the last time this semester. He tells the class that today they are going to wrap up the items they have made during the last few classes. He explains that the finished products are scheduled to be supplied both within the school and externally, so what each of them makes today will determine the flow of their entire first semester. His voice sharpens just a fraction on the final line, telling them to give it their absolute best so they leave with no regrets. A wall of young voices answers him with a single clean yes. Down on the forge floor, our boy Lee Sehun rolls his shoulders and lifts the hammer. For a moment, the sound of steel against fire is the only thing that exists. He watches the ingot bend under his blows and murmurs to himself that this is a mess. His body is not keeping up, so there are a lot of misaligned parts scattered through the piece he is trying to shape. This is not the time to be taking it easy on himself. Sparks fan out in a bright arc as the hammer comes down again harder than before. He lets the rhythm sink into his bones. This should be decent, he decides. The rest will be difficult given the time he has left. If he finishes everything to a moderate standard, he could earn more budget from the department. But, as expected, he tells himself it is only right to make at least one thing properly today. He sets his palm flat over the cooling steel and holds his breath. For a long, strange moment, the workshop around him seems to fade. He recognizes it with quiet certainty as the sound of the world ending. Whenever he has heard this particular sound, he has always created good items. It is not a temporary sharpness he is chasing now. It is an edge engraved into the body of the blade itself. White light blooms outward from the anvil in a slow spreading wave. Small windows unfold in the air around him, one after the other. The armament-designated white light longsword has been completed. The readout notes that a great blacksmith reveals their intent through basics alone. The technique of a blacksmith who has fully drawn out a material's potential to forge a new edge is no exaggeration to call first class. A second window pings softly beneath it and announces that he has acquired the skill called White Light Style, rated at C. A third window unfolds a full description of the finished weapon. White Light Longsword, rare grade, high quality. It is a longsword with a pure white edge forged into it. The discreetly polished blade meshes with the manner arrangement, possessing a tough yet sharp edge. It is called a masterpiece by a blacksmith with outstanding skills, and its cutting power is enhanced further when mana is injected into it. The guy studies the finished blade with a small, tired smile. Considering that he only used normal iron for it, he thinks this is only decent. His skills from before the regression are returning to him, albeit very slightly. Behind him, two of his classmates hunch over their own ruined pieces and stare at Sehun's sword with hollow eyes. One of them mutters that he really hates this. The other whispers a broken, half-serious question about whether he should just drop out. Harham. The next day on Saturday morning, the campus feels 100 times quieter. 2 students sit at an outdoor cafe table with steaming drinks. The red-headed senior across from Sehun smiles at him over the rim of her glasses. She tells him she did not expect he would want to see her enchanting work. Sehun lifts one shoulder and answers that, well, he was curious about her basic skills too. He glances around at the crowded terrace and adds that there are a lot of people here for a private demonstration. She only grins wider and reassures him that her workplace is a bit more secluded than this. A bit more secluded turns out to be an understatement. They walk past the last stone wall of the academy grounds, and then past the outer gardens, and then down a long, dusty road that winds into open countryside. Sehun narrows his eyes at the horizon and asks if this is not a little too far away. She tosses her red hair over one shoulder without breaking pace, laughing that he really thought he could see her enchanting that easily. A wide valley of green fields opens up around them, and at the far end of it sits a single sun-baked wooden building beneath a hand-painted sign that reads, "A Kharkov hardware store." "Here it is," she chirps, pushing the door open. She calls into the shadowed interior. Sehun follows her in and adds a bright greeting just to match the mood. A dry, unamused voice answers back from behind the counter, telling them that she is not deaf. An elderly woman with silver hair pulled up into a neat bun steps out to meet them, sharp-eyed and lean, wiping her hands on the apron at her waist. She looks Sehun up and down without much warmth and asks the girl who this one is and if he is her boyfriend. The redhead sputters and denies it flatly. Then she softens her tone to explain that this is the Borsipay department valedictorian who entered this year. The old woman's mouth twists into a small private thought that Babel is finished too if it is accepting such soft-looking guys these days. Out loud, she simply says her name is Helena. Our boy dips his head politely and answers that he is Lee Sehun, a first year in the refining department. "My Theo." Helena grumbles at the girl to stop messing around and just get to work quickly because work has piled up a lot this week because of the freshmen. The redhead sing-songs an unbothered yes yes. She tugs Sehun by the sleeve and points the way to the workshop at the back of the store. As they walk, our boy watches Helena disappear back behind her counter and thinks quietly to himself that this old woman's skills seem better than he first thought. He genuinely does not understand why she is running something like a hardware store all the way out in a place like this. The redhead sighs beside him that, yes, work really has piled up on her lately. Inside the workshop, she flicks on a lamp and slides a wide, flat tray across her work table. She tells him that this is an enchant palette, showing him the 8 neat wells of color arranged along it. "These are powders made by grinding magic stones," she explains. Sehun leans in, curious about the layout. He notes to her that he knows the standard is 8 colors, but she seems to handle them quite diversely. She admits with a proud little smile that, yes, her job is restoring damaged enchantment formulas with this palette. She flourishes a fine brush in her hand and adds that here she can earn money and perform enchantments to her heart's content without ever having to worry about material costs. A shimmering ribbon of golden dust rises off her brush as she works, curling into a delicate spiral above the palette. From somewhere in the doorway, Helena watches without a word. The old woman finally steps back into the room a while later, arms folded. She tells the girl that she came in person because she seemed to be in a slump. A slump, Helena adds dryly, that would befit a has-been who brings failures to every exam and cannot even keep the department valedictorian seat. The redhead deflates comically at the desk. Helena leans over the palette and hums that as expected. Seeing it in person, she thinks she knows the cause and the solution for the slump. Being able to immerse yourself like this is also a talent, she remarks. Helena presses her fingertip against a specific corner of the palette and murmurs that this arrangement resonates with the mana structure to grant a special effect. She was itching to do something since she engraved white light for the first time in a while anyway. She smiles thinly at Sehun and tells him to try using it. If he can, that is, she adds, tilting her head toward the far wall. She invites him to pick anything he likes from the pile of blades stacked over there. The young man eyes her and thinks with quiet amusement that this old woman feels like she is bossing him around already. He mutters under his breath that if he can use a special whetstone of that quality, then he should definitely try it. His fingers close around a slim, dark rectangle at the bottom of the pile. Helena raises an eyebrow when she sees his choice and asks if he is really going to do it with that one. Yes, he answers her simply without breaking pace. He explains that seeing how the blade is worn evenly on this piece and the axis is not twisted, it looks like the knife of someone who knows how to handle a sword. For this weapon, he continues, the whetstone he picked is the one with the most evenly compressed mana particles. If he goes with this one, he should be able to handle it properly, even when he sharpens the edge all the way to its limit. The workshop grows very quiet as our boy sets the whetstone down and draws the knife across it in a long, patient stroke. Helena's eyes widen a fraction as she watches him work. That guy is really a freshman who entered this year, she wonders silently to herself. From the other end of the room, the redhead throws her fist in the air and cheers a triumphant done. Helena starts and jerks her head around, demanding to know when the girl even got there. The redhead, still grinning, sing-songs back that she has no idea. Then she leans in and teases that Helena tried to find something wrong with her junior but got schooled instead. Helena's face flushes red as she snarls at her to shut up and lands a smart smack across the top of the girl's head. A comical shriek escapes the redhead as she crumples against the desk. Helena straightens her apron with as much dignity as she can salvage and turns to Sehun, asking if he is all done. He hums a small yes and holds the knife up to the light, examining the new edge. This is the best he could do for now, he tells her, but he will do better next time. Helena stares at the blade for a long moment, and then without another word, tells them both to get going now. The redhead skips out beside our boy, waving cheerfully that Helena is just being cranky for no reason, and they should leave already. The bell above the door chimes as they disappear back into the sunlit fields outside. Inside the empty workshop, Helena stands alone at the counter for a long while, gazing down at the sharpened knife lying quietly beside her palette. She does not touch it just yet. A moment later, the front door bangs open again with far more force than any student would dare. A broad-shouldered man in a sharply cut pinstripe suit strides in with dark hair swept back and a wolfish smile splitting his face. He booms at her, asking if she is smithing again. Helena tells him to be quiet without looking up. He plants his hands on the counter and demands to know what about the kitchen knife, because orders are backed up right now at the restaurant. She rounds on him sharply and asks when on earth he is going to quit that restaurant of his. A guy who is supposed to be a professor of the combat department, she scolds, running a kitchen on the side. He shrugs it off with an easy grin and tells her not to nag him about someone else's hobby. Then his eye catches on the sharpened knife lying by the pallet, and every trace of playfulness drops out of his face. He says softly that, here it is. He picks the knife up and turns it slowly between his fingers, with his expression sliding into something almost reverent. He asks his sister in a very different tone if she drank and sharpened this again. Helena tells him flatly that it was not her. Then he presses, asking if it is the work of one of those assistants she has been close with recently. Helena shakes her head slowly and tells him it was a freshman. He asks what kind of freshman, disbelieving. A freshman who entered this year sharpened it, she confirms in a level voice. The pinstripe professor tilts his face toward the light and gazes at the blade in his hand. And in the quiet of the empty workshop, over the sound of distant birds outside, he murmurs a single question to himself with slow dawning hunger over the words. Who on earth is that guy?